We're good? Okay. Now we will call to order the Holladay City Council meeting on November 6th, and as is our tradition, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody please rise. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Before we open up public comment, I'll just remind those in the audience that if you are here to address the council regarding item number 5 on the agenda, which is the public hearing on the general plan update, if you're here to address the council on that particular issue, if you'd please wait till we get to that item, and then we'll open up that public hearing and you'll have a chance to address the council on that item specifically. If you would like to address the council on anything other than the Holladay Horizons general plan update, public comment is the time to do that. We ask you to please keep it to 3 minutes or less, and you just approach the podium. Trudy will come up and show you exactly how to do it. Come on up, Trudy. We just ask for your name and address, and again, 3 minutes or less. So, Trudy from the library.
That's right, Trudy from the library. Thanks for having me. I want to thank all of the community members who came in to vote. That was nice to see a good turnout on a smaller election day, not a presidential one. And also for the people who stayed and helped us plant 6 trees that day. That was pretty awesome. We have some fun things going on at the library, but first I want to let you know that we'll be closed on Veterans Day on the 11th. Also for Thanksgiving, we will be closed on the 27th and the 28th, and we will close early at 6 p.m. on the 26th so that we can go home and cook too. So we are going to be having a gratitude turkey all month long. Please come in and fill out a feather for our turkey. Also, we are starting a new program on the 13th that is a learn a board game night. We will be, if you've ever really wanted to learn how to play Settlers of Catan, that's what we're learning. And then also in conjunction with Happy Healthy Holiday Coalition, on December 3rd, there's going to be a suicide prevention class at 6:30. There will be treats, and it should be really informative and good information there. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Trudy. Any questions for Trudy? Thanks again. We love the library. Okay, public comment remains open. Anybody else that wishes, come on up. Name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Brett Hansen. My address is 4495 South Arcadia Lane. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. Just wanted to discuss something that has been important to myself and several of my neighbors. So last week, a child was struck by a vehicle on their way to school at the intersection of 4500 South and Holladay Boulevard. Luckily, this child survived. However, it is only a matter of time before someone is killed at this dangerous intersection. This intersection has no protected left turn signal, so that means that the drivers are required to yield to pedestrians crossing. However, I cross this intersection nearly every day, and only about 50% of the cars yield to pedestrians. I have almost been struck by a car more times than I can count. Additionally, the street light at this corner sometimes does not work, making it more difficult for pedestrians to be seen. It has gotten so bad that many people now just jaywalk across 4500 South instead of risking crossing this intersection. Every day, dozens of children cross this intersection on their way to Olympus Junior High or to the park, the skate park. If we do not do something to fix this intersection, it's only a matter of time before someone is killed or seriously injured. So I urge you to please add a protected left turn signal at this intersection and fix the broken street light there before another accident happens. Thank you.
Can I just ask one question? Is this the intersection that connects with Albright on the north?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And the issue is always coming from Holladay Boulevard, turning left onto 4500 South.
So northbound on Holladay Boulevard, turning westbound on 45th.
Correct.
Okay, I was going to have you add that in an email, but we can just put it down for the record. And for the record, I think everybody, or at least I have an email from you that I received today. I think, did all of the council members get that?
Yeah.
That details your comments as well. So I'm certain we'll be passing that along to Jared and Joe, certainly on the light issue, and then we can
I
take up
did
the other issue
notice
as well.
that the light was on today. It was not on last night, but
Okay.
it's on today.
We will look into that for certain.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else for public comment? Okay. Okay, then we will close public comments, and we are going to move to item number 4. We're really pleased to have representatives from the PTA with us tonight. They reached out a couple of weeks ago and are celebrating their 100th anniversary and asked us if we would be willing to carve out a little time and do a proclamation, which we, and I was explaining to Julie, and I'll invite her up in just a second, that I've been doing this for a long time, and we've always had a very strong relationship with our public schools. It's fundamental to this council that we feel that the public school infrastructure is really the undergirding strength of the community. And so all of our council members serve as liaisons to the various elementaries, junior highs, and high schools that are in Holladay or support Holladay, and have had a great relationship with Granite School District and the superintendents, and certainly our two who I feel are incredible representatives, Clark Nelson and Julie Jackson. And with that, we have a PowerPoint presentation that all council members have. You're going to see it in just a minute, and we're going to invite Julie up to make that presentation and introduce her partners that are here.
My name is Julie Clough. I am the 2025 to 2027 Utah PTA president, and I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves.
I'm Cammie Whitchurch, and I am the Utah PTA president-elect.
I'm Tina Seastrand, and I am the Safety Commissioner for Utah PTA.
My name is Liz Shellum. I am the Region 5 Support Chair, which means I support all of the PTAs in Granite School District.
That is true, because I am the Howard R. Driggs, current PTA president. I'm Amy Gabbert.
Welcome.
You can go to the next slide, please. So as you can see, I have a great support system. I am honored to be the president of 66,000 members throughout the state of Utah, many of them being here in Holladay and Granite School District. And I'm deeply honored to serve them and to travel around the state and get to know the people in their community. So thank you for the time and being a partner with our PTAs. So 100 years ago in October, the National PTA came to Utah and visited the UEA. At that time, Utah PTA was a committee of the Utah Education Association. We were the Home and Family League. And at that meeting, we were invited to finally join the National Parent Teacher Association. So that's when we became official. Next. But that wasn't our beginning. We actually were at the very beginning of National PTA. In 1897, 3 representatives from the state of Utah joined in the first National Congress when the organization was organized. And we actually were one of the first states to organize a state PTA, but because of some practices in Utah, we were disfellowshipped for a while. So from 1898 until 1925, we had a strong parent engagement presence in Utah. And it didn't matter where you went, if there was a public school, there were parents actively engaged and partnering with their school districts. And I love that history. Next. So what many people know about us are our programs. And if I were to ask you to stand up, everybody in the room would stand up at some point. If you've been involved in an arts program, if you've been involved in a Battle of the Bands program, if you've attended any kind of leadership training, if you've participated in reflections or red ribbon weeks or green ribbon weeks or school of excellence, teacher appreciation, or even carnivals and field days, school plays, school musicals, and after-school enrichment programs. These are all things that volunteers are doing every day in our schools. We also have a great advocacy history and have been very actively involved in advocating for our children and our families. In 1935, Utah PTA advocated for warm lunches in the state of Utah, and at the time, 1,200 children left home every day without a meal, and one was provided for them. And think back to when 1935 was. That was in the heart of the Great Depression, and that had to have been hard, but they made sure that those kids had a hot meal when they came to school every day. In 1964, Utah PTA actively promoted the creation of the Youth Suicide Prevention Centers and continued to advocate for mental health services for our youth. Next. In 1989, we had a PTA mom that realized that the trust lands that were granted to Utah at statehood had not been managed well, and she took it upon herself to figure out how they worked and how they can be improved, and that was the start of many things like SITLA and the Trust Lands Trust Fund, and we are still an advocate for that today and have a strong presence within that community. Also in 2007, we led the charge to fight the voucher program. This one hits particularly home to me. I'm a resident of Midvale that has a very high Title I population, and every dollar counts in my community, just like it does in every other community, and vouchers take away from that. And so we are a strong proponent of keeping public education dollars in our public education and in our public schools so that they can do the most good for the most students. Next. In 2018, we had the honor of taking a resolution that Utah had written, and we took it to the national stage. It was called High Expectations for Students with Disabilities. Our special needs specialist, Karen Condor, stood before the delegates at National PTA Convention and presented this resolution, and it passed. So we now have a national PTA resolution that supports high expectations for all students. So our strength definitely comes from all the work that we've done, but really our longevity will be the people who do so much with very little sometimes. Oh, I didn't get changed. Dang it. Dang. I found pictures from Holladay. The Holladay numbers, now I'm going to have to look. I'm like, dang, didn't get changed. We track volunteer hours every year, and last year we had just under a million hours volunteered through the state of Utah. And Holladays was epic. You guys did such a good job. These guys are quietly doing all the things in all the schools, and they did thousands of hours. They did 24,302 hours, and that total in the dollar amount, if you, it's $34 an hour to calculate a volunteer's worth, is $845,000 that was given back to Holladay schools in the 2024 calendar year. That's remarkable. And that's the power of parent engagement. When I go around, I often tell my parent volunteers, you need to be in your city councils. You need to be connecting with them. They want to partner with our schools. And it's really cool to hear that you guys already do that and you have a liaison at each one of our schools and you're actively partnering. And I hope they will continue to come to city council meetings and tell you the great things that they're doing, because they are doing awesome things every single day. So the one thing I want you guys to remember is PTA is a network. It's not a hierarchy. Every member, every leader on every level is important, and they have built a lasting legacy. Next. For a century, Utah PTA has been a steadfast advocate for children, families, and education, shaping policies and initiatives that strengthen communities. As we celebrate 100 years of dedication, we honor the countless volunteers, leaders, and advocates who have championed for student success, safety, and well-being. This milestone reflects a legacy of impact, collaboration, and unwavering commitment to a bright future for Utah's youth. Here's to the next 100 years of making a difference. And if you have the chance, if you haven't joined a PTA yet, we encourage you to join. Our goal is 100,000 members, and we've got quite a few more to go, so everyone counts. So if you'd like to use the QR code or click on that in the PowerPoint that you have, we would love to have you be a member of one school in your town. So thank you.
All right, thanks. Before we come down, before we have proclamations going to be read by Councilmember Gray, I want to turn it over to the council if anybody wants to make any comments before Emily reads the proclamation.
I'll just say that I think the schools in our community are a really important part of the fabric that makes Holladay great. And I think we have great parents and great teachers, and we really appreciate the time and effort that the PTA puts into helping back up the efforts that are happening in our schools.
Yeah, we're probably an older bunch. I think most of our kids have graduated, except I think Ty's got one and Emily's got a couple. But I think all of us were involved in public schools and certainly involved in the PTA are very familiar with it, and also the community councils that volunteer and give back. But so we thank you for the good work you do. We had how many first graders, Holly? Like 19 first graders here, and man, God bless those teachers. There was one, and then there were three parents supporting the field trip, and trying to keep them focused for 45 minutes was something to watch, but they were great. It was fun working with them. So with that, then we'll have Emily read the proclamation into the record, and then we'll come down for a photo.
All right, a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Holladay recognizing and supporting Parent-Teacher Association in City of Holladay schools and celebrating the Utah PTA Centennial. Whereas the Parent-Teacher Association is a vital organization that connects families, schools, and communities to support the success and well-being of every child. And whereas the PTA in the City of Holladay schools provide valuable programs, resources, and volunteer support that strengthen education and build a stronger community. And whereas involvement in PTA encourages collaboration, leadership, and advocacy for students at all levels. And whereas in October 1925, at the annual convention of the Utah Education Association, Margaretta Reeves, president of the National Congress of Parents and Teachers, officially invited the Utah Mothers Congress to join the national organization. Accepting this invitation, Utah became the Utah Congress of Parents and Teachers with Lucille Young Reed as its first president, marking a new era of parent and family engagement in Utah. And whereas the centennial year provides an opportunity to reflect on Utah PTA's many accomplishments and celebrate 100 years as a powerful voice for children, a trusted resource for parents, and a strong advocate for public education. And whereas throughout its history, Utah PTA has been instrumental in establishing programs and services that improve children's lives, including defending public education and ensuring stable funding, advancing parent and family engagement, supporting hot and healthy school lunch programs, promoting arts and education, strengthening the juvenile justice system, and championing school safety. And whereas today, Utah PTA is the largest volunteer child advocacy organization in Utah, uniting parents, caregivers, grandparents, educators, and other caring adults in a shared mission to make every child's potential a reality. And whereas for a century, Utah PTA has left a lasting impact on schools, families, and communities across the state by fostering leadership, empowering voices, and ensuring that generations of children have benefited from stronger educational opportunities, healthier environments, and a greater sense of belonging. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the City Council of the City of Holladay does hereby proclaim our support of the Parent-Teacher Associations serving City of Holladay schools, honor the 100-year legacy of Utah PTA, and encourage all citizens, staff, and elected officials of the city to join and actively support their local PTA in a reaffirmation of the commitment to make every child's potential a reality. Signed this 6th day of November, 1925. 2025, sorry. I'm from the last century.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you guys do.
Thank you. I don't know if you guys do this. Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, council. Thanks, Stephanie, for whoever prepared the proclamation. Was that you? Personally? Okay, we are on item number 5. This is the beginning of the culmination of a years-long work on a general plan, the Holladay Horizons Plan that's been through the Planning Commission now, I believe, and we had, as a reminder, we've had a pretty long presentation at the last council meeting that kind of gave us an overview of where things are. We have a staff report in the packet, so I'm going to invite John up. Delaney's here as well. We'll probably hear more from her when we get to the work session. John, you want to come on up and give us an overview, and we'll see what questions we have, and then we'll open up the public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. Indeed, this has been a long time coming. We started this process a little over a year ago. We're getting into the thick of it about this time last year. But presenting to you on this agenda item is a legislative request to review and adopt an update to City of Holladay's general plan. The general plan is in its 10th year and is required to have an update every 10 years or so. As a statutory compliance requirement to adopt an update, or at least a general plan and an update every 10 years, the City of Holladay is engaged Logan Simpson to assist in the public engagement, outreach, data gathering, and on creating all the necessary updates that would take your current general plan and apply 10 years worth of statutory compliance, terminology that's been updated, and some tweaks to existing development processes and projects that have actually occurred over the past 10 years or so. Acting as a blueprint for the city, the general plan provides the city council and development community and residents a vision of the future. Logan Simpson has been able to create a consensus of a lot of public engagement and involvement to establish what that vision is, and applying it to this update for you to review. The Planning Commission has been able to review this update over several sessions and has made quite a bit of changes, mostly for readability. One of the primary focuses of this update was to ensure that the general plan is readable, is approachable. Usually, most cities' general plans become a little wordy in their application of sometimes just basic principles of how a city would like to grow, how it would like to develop, even be modified in some ways. So the Planning Commission took their time in diligently reviewing the draft that's been presented by Logan Simpson and presented to you as a recommendation. In the draft, you have sets of text that would be bold or in a different, I think we picked green instead of red as far as the new text that the Planning Commission recommended. So you'll see as you read through the document where the Planning Commission's changes recommendations are. At this point, the public hearing is required to be opened as a final act for the city council, and we'll happy to have any questions answered in your work session.
Okay, yeah, so just as a reminder, we'll be opening this discussion back up during the work session, but are there any other questions for John or Delaney before we open up the public hearing? Okay, there being none, we will open the public hearing. It's now open. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the council regarding the Holladay Horizons general plan update? Okay. There being none, we will close the public hearing, and we will move to items number 6 and 7 on the agenda. These both have to do with the recent request from Brighton to join our justice court. We've gone through that process, and we have to basically notify the local courts through resolution that we're going to enter that agreement, then have an interlocal as well. So first on the agenda is consideration of resolution 2025-25, the notification of the Judicial Council of the State of Utah of the intent to expand the jurisdiction of the Holladay Justice Court to include the corporate boundaries of Brighton City. So any questions for Gina or Jamie before we take a motion on this resolution?
My only very ancillary concern is that sometimes I notice we're pretty short of parking. We have very limited parking. I presume since we don't anticipate a whole lot of volume from adding this municipality that it's not going to affect parking that much, but generally we're pretty slim on parking, so it's a concern.
And I think that is a completely legitimate concern. In terms of overall volume, though, we expect the caseload from Brighton in a year to equal about what just Holladay produces in a month. So we don't feel like it's going to be a significant impact on parking.
Mr. Mayor, I move adoption of resolution 2025-25, notifying the Judicial Council of the State of Utah of the intent to expand the jurisdiction of the Holladay Justice Court to include the corporate boundaries of Brighton City.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll go to vote. Councilmember Gray.
Yes.
Councilmember Quinn.
Yes.
Councilmember Fotheringham.
Yes.
Councilmember Durham.
Yes.
Councilmember Brewer.
Yes.
And chair votes yes. Resolution 2025-25 is approved. Thank you, Council. Now to the interlocal agreement. Any questions for Gina or Jamie on the interlocal agreement before we take a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I had moved the adoption of resolution 20.
May I make one comment before you
sure.
make a motion? The statutory references in that agreement, when I went through them with counsel for the town of Brighton, some of the statutory references recently moved, and so we need to update those. Would you mind, when you make your motion, just approval with instruction that we update those statutory references?
Mr. Mayor, I move the adoption of resolution 2025-26, approving an interlocal agreement with Brighton City for justice court services with conforming updates to the statutory references.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Vote to vote. Councilmember Gray.
Yes.
Councilmember Quinn.
Yes.
Councilmember Fotheringham.
Yes.
Councilmember Durham.
Yes.
Councilmember Brewer. And chair votes yes. The interlocal with Brighton is approved. Thank you, Council. Consent agenda are minutes from August 8th, 28th, September 11th, and September 18th. I would just need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda of minutes on August 8th, August 28th, September 11th, and September 18th of 2025.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? There being none, the consent agenda is approved. Thank you, Council. And City Manager report, Gina Chamness.
Mayor, Council, I actually have a lot to share tonight. First item I wanted to make sure the council is aware of is that this week, the state released a visioning master plan for a network of trails that Governor Cox announced a year or two ago. This is called the Utah Trail Network, and you can find an interactive map at utahtrailnetwork.utah.gov if you're interested. As part of that plan, the legislature has allocated $45 million annually to fund the eventual build out of this trail network statewide. There are a couple of trails on this list for Holladay and another potential trail that I would call Holladay adjacent that I thought you'd be interested in knowing about. The first project in Holladay that is on the list is one that we have prioritized and applied for grant funds previously, and that is a trail along I-215 from Knutson Park to Highland Drive. That section was highly rated but not funded in the last round. And eventually, as you'll see on that trail network, the trail is projected to continue to the Jordan River in Murray. The other section of trail in Holladay is another one we've spent some time talking about, and that is the trail along 39th South. Eventually, the plan is for that to run from Wasatch Boulevard to a terminus point in West Valley City, and then we'll link up with other trails in that area. One section, as you know, of that trail has been built, and that is the section east of 23rd East to Wasatch. For us, the trickiest piece is going to be that section between Highland Drive and probably 20th East or so, until the slope of that hill on 39th levels out. The piece that was new to us is, and that is Holladay adjacent, is a section of trail that is being proposed along Van Winkle. It's the first time that I personally have seen this, and I think that has a real potential to benefit our residents with connections to 7th East and downtown eventually. I just wanted to make the council aware of this program. There's a lot that we don't yet understand about how funding will work, but the legislature has really committed to a significant investment, and we're thrilled to see those projects that we're supportive of on this network master plan. In that same vein, we are planning to apply for a number of grants that WFRC administers. And I believe I shared with you in September the letters of intent for these programs. We are planning to apply for funding for the Highland Drive reconstruction and complete streets, the bike ped portion of that project. Planning to apply for funding for the 215 trail program, the one that we just talked about from Knutson to Highland Drive, and then two other grants that we think will be smaller in nature. As you're planning to adopt the general plan, we recognize that that will require some ordinance amendments. We've been working through ordinance revisions on everything except land use, and we're hoping to receive some funding to have someone help us make those ordinance changes as a result of your updated general plan. And then finally, we're also hoping to apply for some study dollars for the northeast, of Highland Drive from 39th South to 3990 South. Looking at options on that corridor where Master Lee, am I getting that name right, is currently down to about Les Schwab, that sort of area. So if the council has any objections to those grant applications, let me know. Otherwise, we're planning to submit those, I believe, by the 1st of December. I also wanted to make the council aware that our longtime prosecutor, Tucker Hansen, has let me know he is retiring and has provided us with a 120-day notice because unfortunately his firm is also getting out of the business of providing contract prosecution services. There have been some challenges for prosecutors and for communities like ours that contract for our prosecution services. So I'm going to spend the next couple of weeks thinking about, is there a solution to some of the difficulties Tucker has raised? I don't have a clear path to resolve some of those difficulties. And I think it's completely possible that we may need to bring those services in-house. So hire a prosecutor and likely two paralegals to support that prosecutor. That's a big project in a short amount of time. And so I likely on the 20th will be coming back to you with a plan. But at this point, I just wanted to make sure that the council is aware of that major change, and also really to thank Tucker and his firm for the 13 years or so that they've spent prosecuting cases in our court. You'll be hearing more about this soon.
I assume if we hire a prosecutor, the cost for that would be split with the other entities with whom we
That's correct, yeah.
provide services.
But would you anticipate significant budget impact by the change in structure of the prosecutor's office?
I mean, it is possible. We've allocated about $315,000 right now to our contract prosecution service that we share with the other communities. I think that it should be doable for us to hire an in-house prosecutor and probably 2 part-time legal assistants within that budget. But I haven't done the math and I don't know yet. Next item, in preparation for our new incoming council members, we put together a guidebook that we'll be sharing with them. It provides a lot of information about our city, our form of government, what the role of the mayor and the council is, and some basic orientation to bylaws and attendance and what each department does and what each of our contract providers does. And I am interested in feedback from you all who've been through this process recently. What would you have liked to have known up front that maybe we didn't tell you? And so you can either provide me with that information right now if you have something, you have a burning item that you've been wanting to tell me about for the last 6 or 7 or 8 years, or you could send me an email and just let me know. Okay. And then finally, as you know, in preparation for our bond issue, we were evaluated by 2 rating agencies, both S&P Global and Fitch. And I'm pleased to share again and again and again, I'm going to keep doing this, that both agencies have provided us with a general rating of AAA. I know you're all aware of my municipal budget and finance background, and so I've gone through this process many times. And I'll tell you that for a myriad of reasons, when I started with this city almost 10 years ago, I never imagined that we would be at a point where we were receiving this kind of rating. We were in a much different position in terms of our planning for capital projects, in terms of our reserves, and in terms of the commitment of this body to really develop a plan for both capital projects and for financial sustainability. I am really grateful and gratified that we've made so much progress, and this recognition for me is like icing on the cake. I hope it feels that same way to the mayor, because I know you have been a longtime champion of both this kind of planning and fiscal stewardship that this rating rewards. It feels pretty great to see that rewarded with a rating that's going to save our taxpayers money. in terms of the overall cost of the bond. And I hope you all share that pride. You deserve it for your resolution and commitment to making good financial choices for our city. So thank you.
I'm not going to let you get away without me commenting. Because I am very proud of that. And I don't say me because it's been a team effort, but I think it is a credit to this council for the way you go through a budget and how seriously you take how you spend taxpayer dollars to make sure they're spent as wisely as possible. But I think it's also Gina, I think you have to take a ton of credit for it. Your leadership and kind of steady guidance has been critical to establishing a environment where we've been able to achieve this goal. And I think that goes all the way down to your staff and the entire staff of the city, Christian in finance. Yeah, I won't lie. I'm very proud of it. I think it's something we should all be proud of. So, good job.
Thank you.
Just to add a little context, for instance, what was the bond rating we had issued for like the fire station bond?
I think that was a AA-. That's my recollection.
I mean, part of that too is if you go back to the fire station bond, I mean, that had to be 2008 or so. We just haven't done a lot of bonding and borrowing. We've tried to pay as we go for the most part. So anyway, I'm really proud of that, and I think the staff should be proud of it as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gina. Okay. Any questions for Gina before we move on to council reports? I think that's where we are. Why don't we start with Ty, because he's got to do a little report on the mosquito abatement, speaking to tax increases.
Speaking of tax increases, yes. Apparently there's a Utah statutory code that requires that, and I don't know if it's in the case of special districts like the mosquito abatement district, but that we provide for a public hearing here locally and advise on a tax increase. In the case of the South Salt Lake Mosquito Abatement District, they've not raised taxes since 2012. And I can say, I don't know what their bond rating would be if they were to go out to bond, but they're very modest in what they do. You'll see that with what they're proposing, it will yield $320,000 in additional tax revenue. Their entire budget with that is about $1.7 million annually. So it's relatively, in the context of government agencies, relatively small. On a household that has an assessed value of $600,000, it would amount to a 77 cents increase. So death by 1,000 cuts, right, is what this would be one of those. But in any case, these funds will be used for just stabilization of finances. They're looking at expanding and doing some more drone-based surveillance, and then also to support some capital projects, their fleet and different things like that they want to just keep up and good. It is increasingly important. We do have now, we've had fatalities in Utah now from West Nile, and and so they play an important role in trying to help keep things at bay, I guess, as it relates to mosquitoes and black flies and others. So I think that will cover what they needed to have done to be compliant with that statute. Aside from that, as far as my district report goes, we mentioned it in the briefing session, but speaker series this Monday at 7 will feature Fairbanks. And so Arnold Freeberg's passed away, but two artists and sculptors, and it should be a very good presentation on these two really renowned artists. And that'll be this Monday at 7 o'clock. I think that's all I've got.
I've got a few thank yous. First to our tree committee for a really active October, where they, in end of September, I guess, where we did some tree plantings for the 25th anniversary of the city, and also to honor one of our former tree committee chairman, Travis Jones. And then Trudy mentioned the tree planting that happened in collaboration with Tree Utah at the library this last week. But I also wanted to thank Chief Hoyle and Jared for helping with a meeting with the neighbors on Sueda Drive this last week or two. They were really helpful in kind of thinking through some options for a traffic problem there, and we're still working on it, and Gina and I have been in communication about it, but the neighbors were very appreciative, and the approach that Jared and the chief took was very helpful. That's all I got.
Well, nothing's been going on in District 3. Oh, except I'd just like to congratulate my good friend Natalie Bradley, who will be taking this chair next January. Other than that, everything else pales in comparison, so that's all I have.
Thank you. Just a small update on the Community Renewable Energy Agency, which has been rebranded as the Utah Renewable Communities. The program is now in front of the Public Service Commission. There will be a public hearing on December 16th, and if any of our residents or any of the public want to comment, there is a public comment period that day, the 16th of December, starting at 6 p.m., and that's downtown at the Heber Wells building. That's all.
So I have a couple of things. We talked a little bit in the pre-meeting about different opportunities for service in our community. One more that I wanted to mention at Cottonwood High School. I have these I'm hoping that we can put somewhere in City Hall for people, even though they're door hangers. There's a neighborhood day of service on December 6th to support Cottonwood High School's Christmas extravaganza. This is a wonderful event for low-income students where they can come and shop for their families and for their siblings. A lot of them do all of their Christmas shopping at this event, where the community, they're very well supported in the community, but we need help every year to make sure that these families are able to have a successful Christmas. So they look for new items. Pretty much anything that kids and teenagers want is on the board, on the table, and you can bring it December 6th. So I'll leave that flyer here for anyone who's interested in having that be something as part of their family or their neighborhood or their church or whoever wants to be a part of it. It's a wonderful service to the community. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is with the Central Wasatch Commission. I'm really excited that Holladay is now a part of this commission. I think there's a lot of things that affect Holladay residents directly and then indirectly. Currently, the commission is looking at providing a service up Mill Creek Canyon. They have done a study with multiple large sections of public comment, which has been largely positive in support of a shuttle. At this point, they're looking at doing a pilot program next summer. None of this has been decided, so if anybody has any thoughts on that, let me know that I can bring it back to them as we're still discussing this, to determine frequency and the best location for staging and those kind of things. Likely, they're looking at doing it just Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays because it's not necessarily a traffic issue up Mill Creek Canyon like it is up the Cottonwood Canyons. It's more of a parking issue for anyone who recreates in Mill Creek Canyon. That's pretty obvious. So they're looking at doing that, trying to figure out accommodations for people with dogs, people with cross-country skis, all of those kind of things that tend to be used up Mill Creek Canyon. But they're very excited, and then just looking at different funding sources for that moving forward. But it was really great to hear Park City's experience with a similar shuttle that was very successful for them up in the Bonanza Flat area. Anyway, that's what's going on there.
Perfect. I'll just echo what Emily said about that December 6th event. It's pretty remarkable. So if you're not doing anything on that day and you want to feel really good about humanity, go by Cottonwood High School and see what the residents and volunteers do to help those families out. It's a pretty amazing event. The only thing I'd like to add is last night they honored Mayor Silvestrini's service, 9 years of service in Mill Creek. I think everybody knows that Sherry Jackson was appointed by the City Council as the new mayor of Mill Creek and will be sworn in, I believe, on Monday and officially take take charge there. But Mayor Silvestrini has been an incredible leader for that city and for the county and for the state. Just done an amazing job with that city. And my understanding is Sherry's going to be great too. And we've always had such a great relationship with them as kind of a sister city. And I've reached out to her today via text and congratulated her. And we'll look forward to continuing our healthy partnership with the city of Mill Creek. So, and I think that's it. I think we can take a motion to recess. We'll move across the hall and start discussion on the general plan.
Motion to recess.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, for recess. We'll take a couple minutes break and we'll meet across the hall in the mental interest room. Oh, I forgot to tell you guys, we do have a closed session.
Updates and not major fundamental changes, right? And so we're excited to get this thing adopted.
I can agree. I can tell you what, it's been, we did have a grant that we received. It's a partnership with a firm that allowed us to do such extensive outreach and create such a phenomenal content. Primarily, what's great about this is the accompanying online meetings. That really is a new aspect for a lot of municipalities, and Logan seems to be really delivered on something like that. We have a great GIS team, a great research team, being able to, they've been just it's a charm to work with that type of firm that knows how to reach out to the public and create that interaction between the municipality and its citizens.
John,
Can you remind me, this was
to the right thing.
I think you mentioned how phenomenal the committee was, and I know Paul and Emily served on it, right? But who else was on there? Can you remind me? Because I wasn't really as engaged in this one as I was on the one.
Right.
Okay, wait. Okay, go back to 3. I think I fixed it.
Right.
Okay.
Well, there was business leader and
Angela, the planning commission. Angela Gong.
yeah.
And our architect from the Spring Lane project.
Ryan.
And
And then the desserts. The dessert shop. Yeah, Auntie Ray's cheese was on there. Rayman. Yeah, Rayman was there.
And Pat Hansen, who's a resident of the city, she's a previous employee with our planning staff, since retired. And Brian Mann, who's on the planning commission, has been with staff with Fire Banks for a number of years. Been doing a job and also on the planning commission. So fantastic steering committee.
Awesome.
Well, I know Doreen has a few slides she'd like to pass through, unless you want to just jump in with questions, and I'll just let her
Awesome. And we can roll through these pretty quickly. I just wanted to set the stage and provide kind of a base for questions. I'm sure that you'll have some. And we can just sort of roll through, as I said, quickly so that we can get to those. I wanted to just acknowledge and keep this slide in here in case you want to come back to it, just looking at the table of contents. I also want to point out that this includes our appendices too. In the appendices, you'll see things like our engagement summaries, which are very helpful. They go through the 3 stages of our engagement process, give a more specific breakdown of what we heard, what we asked, that sort of thing. And then, of course, how it actually, changed the plan itself. We've also got lots of returns, kind of your basic things, and then you'll also see at the end there are small area plans and the moderate income housing plan. So we talked a little bit about that when we talked last. The plan, the general plan, is really just pointing toward the moderate income housing plan, and that is very specifically in our appendices and will be continuously updated by staff on a different timeline. So we wanted to make sure it's here, but it's not necessarily in our general plan. All right. And then I wanted to really quickly as well go over some of the big things that came up in our conversations with the Planning Commission. So as we've talked about, those conversations were quite extensive. We met with them, I believe, 4 times to really dive in and get specific about changes, about things that didn't feel quite right. Obviously, we work very closely with the advisory committee as well. So we had a really, really good engagement from 2 very awesome groups of folks. And so the first thing that came up that was really strong that we heard consistently from the Planning Commission was that they wanted it to be very obvious what the general plan was, who should be using the general plan and how, and what the process looks like, and then also what the difference is between the general plan and our land use law. What is the difference between our future land use categories and our zoning categories? And so we tried very hard to make that very explicit. You'll see in the plan too that we use a lot more visuals because we really want to make it accessible for folks. And so you'll see kind of graphics like this rather than long, lengthy paragraphs with planning jargon. We really wanted to make sure that that was a key part of the updates, as John already mentioned too. And this piece, we've talked about this a little bit, and I do believe that we touched on this last week as well, so I won't go too far in depth, but we simplified the land use descriptions, or the future land use descriptions, to make sure that it's pretty obvious what it is that it's saying. You saw those future land use spreads that we have as well too, so again, it's very user-friendly. That was the intention. We also simplified some of the language in some of those too. So again, at this idea of it being very readable. The map itself, while some of those things are consolidated, has not changed significantly. That was definitely our strategy was that this is an update. If there is some need to change some specific areas in the future, we want to do some really targeted outreach about that specifically as a city and make sure that we're making the right changes. But these are really just consolidations. The one other piece that's related to that future land use map is the areas of opportunity, which is actually just our areas that have small area master plans or other types of special planning associated with them. So we've got our small area master plans. You can see our park master plans as well. Those aren't necessarily going to have as much to do with growth and development, but important to point out also. And then we have our planned unit development. And then these opportunity corridors that are highlighted, it's a little harder to see there and think there. Those are areas that don't necessarily have a small area master plan, but they are important corridors.
Well, why the plan go out of a small area master plan? We're just marking A and B.
So we have.
And they're an A, B, and C, and it goes all the way down to the.
On the opportunity corridors, everybody.
Yeah, small area master plan. We've got Highland Drive cutting off at Springway. There's an A, B, and C area. And I think that those master plans would change, they would add into the appendix. But this just showed what areas of the Highland Drive could be opportunity portions. Gotcha. The missing the opportunity portions of the small area master plans, not where we have a small. Right. Gotcha.
I already mentioned this at the beginning, the reference to the moderate income housing plan. Again, we tried to make that obvious where those policies are showing up in the plan with a little symbol to make sure that people know where they can go and reference that plan. That is, again, being updated on kind of a separate timeline, has really specific requirements from the state that the city staff is monitoring really closely. So we want to make sure that we're just pointing folks towards where that is. All right, and then we've made a couple of small tweaks to the water element of the master plan. This is one of those things John also mentioned. The state is requiring us to make some changes. This is a big one of those. So our graph here shows essentially a water budget for the city of Holladay, and we're in the green in our assessment, which is great. And then we have a lot of goals, policies, strategies that are kind of trying to push us in that proper direction, making sure that we have sufficient water from our water providers in the future.
Is that affecting the use of all users?
Yes, yeah. So this chart here is reflecting in that demand that you see in the corner is based on our future land use map. So we're looking at commercial and residential uses. We don't have any major industrial uses or anything like that in the city of Holladay, and not general limitation either. So it is including all of those based on those land use. That's kind of where we're pulling it from. We have some assumptions that are associated with each of the different land uses in terms of how much water is required for a single family large lot residence. So then we kind of apply that. So all of the assumptions and all of that good stuff is also within the plan so that the city can continue to make those exact same calculations in the future if the future land use map ever changes.
Can I ask just one question to make sure I'm understanding? So it looks like what we're expecting in Jordan Valley's area and Holladay Water is pretty constant, and any growth would be in Salt Lake City Public Utilities. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things that this chart is saying, and this chart is also very generalized. So the data that you see here, Holladay Water Company does not have extensive plans to increase the capacity. We don't necessarily have a huge need either. Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District does have plans to expand their supply. And the big chunk is the Salt Lake Public Utilities, and that is also because that's also the largest chunk that is within the city of Holladay in terms of who's providing us with water. And so that's part of why you'll see that that piece looks so large. But that is an excellent point, and also to take a step back, I know when we have charts and we want to get really specific, this does not necessarily reflect when a new water source is coming online. So it's just trying to keep it super general. So at some point in the future, Salt Lake Public Utilities is going to add capacity, and it's going to be one big bump, and then, kind of another big bump when they have additional new capacity in the future. This is just a generalized version of that, and it does what the state expected from us. So that's just a clarifying point. We do also reference these water conservation plans for each of our public water providers because all of those plans also include timelines for their expansion of service and expansion of capacity, things like that. So we're trying to make sure that people are referencing that. The water providers are the ones who are planning for all of those things, not the city of Holladay necessarily. So we want to make sure we're referencing those rather than kind of placing them in our plan, because again, they're going to be updated on a different timeline than the general plan elements do. Okay, and then in terms of the next steps, you all can see the draft that is available to you now. It has some markups. So these are the things that we wanted to highlight have changed from our planning commission meetings, highlighting things that the planning commission had specifically requested. Obviously, the final draft of this plan will be a clean version of what you all see, but I think it does help to see kind of the extensive review that the planning commission did and the responses that we kind of worked together to create. So other process notes, I'll leave that over to Don as well, but that is the end of kind of my prepared notes. If you have any thoughts or questions, we can jump right in.
So I actually have a question about, it's on slide 18, page 34, with the low density residential area. It says, it's talking about all the R1 zones. And so it has everything, it has what the planning commission added. It says these areas historically supported small scale commercial and that are distributed throughout neighborhoods. The language is a little awkward, but that's,
Yeah.
but I'm also just, are you saying that there's like home businesses? I guess I was trying to understand exactly what that was talking about. And then if including that means that we are advocating for more home businesses. I don't know. I just was like, because primary residential, so I was just trying to understand what exactly the planning commission was getting at with that. And
Yeah. Let's see. So in your current land use district now, we have some commercial areas that did not have a commercial long range envisioned in the town. For example, Oakwood Garden, 27 feet. In the current land use district, it's envisioned to be single-family residential. For some reason, it doesn't have a designation in the long term for commercial there. So they wanted to note that without really modifying the map.
Oh, okay.
And we do have some existing historical commercial, small area commercial, and home-based businesses that are within the low density districts, but to allow those to be maintained and continue.
but they're not like that doesn't imply expansion of that into other areas.
No, because
that was
we
my
didn't denote an actual boundary and how that would expand, and as that like quote unquote opportunity area.
Yeah.
That wasn't.
Okay, that makes sense. Maybe I'm just reading it wrong because I'm reading in public, but that wording was funky to me.
Yeah, I certainly agree, and I think we can clarify that. So just really directly what.
That was the last.
Yeah, and if we're getting at, we're essentially just making that general statement in order to have 27th East fit in. It seems like it makes more sense to recategorize 2700 East and get the west side, does make it fit what it really is, because it's not R1 residential anymore on the west side. The east side, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of shoehorning in that statement to address a small part of a town, a very small part of the city.
Quite a robust conversation about there are some other little pockets too that folks have also noted aside from just that one east. And so that was something, if we want to encapsulate some of those other ones that are smaller and lesser known as well. And that, of course, is going to be kind of a policy decision that we would want to
Don't necessarily change our focus being at the 30,000 foot level as opposed to.
We can take a look at, see if we can clarify some of that for you. But if you want to, can you nominate a suggestion, or I can?
What you said was fine. I just was confused. I was like, oh, it just, when I read it, I was like, oh, I don't really think we want to be like looking at expanding or looking at this as primary residential and then, but people could we can expand to businesses. But I think.
I think what we're getting as well is that we've run into ambiguities before, and this creates an ambiguity, I think. We've previously had land use changes or zone change requests come in, and the general plan has been brought to bear in the discussion, and then you look at something that's ambiguous, and then depending on what the project is and how biases are, you use that ambiguity to justify either decision. And so we would like to not introduce more ambiguities, and the ones we have, to get rid of them.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And maybe just focusing on, because I think big picture, not for this, if we do need to make changes for those so they're not non-conforming use or whatever, and if we just clean that up. But for this, if we need to focus on the fact that we're not changing these historical uses that we're, and that's kind of the main.
Sure, that's really clear.
That was the only big question I had. I think I've done it. I really think you guys have done a phenomenal job.
And also, shout out to UPD, Chief Snyder. Pass it along.
Yeah, they're big chief.
Different way. Your neighborhoods. Yeah. I think in different light, rather than looking at a straight down view in the majority of general plans, this gives you a better feel of texture in your city, and especially in each individual district. Is that our drone unit, or it is just, I'll pass that along. Thank you.
Hey, going back to that water slide we talked about, where Holladay water is set and York Valley is set, and all of the change impact is on Salt Lake City water utilities. Yeah, I'm confused by that a little bit because the geographies that those cover are their geographies. And if there's going to be growth, it's not that those sections of town are inhibited from growth relative to the areas served by Salt Lake City Public Utilities.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out why is it that Salt Lake City Public Utilities is the only one that will be required or will have to address growth. Because, you know, for instance, we've got this ADU ordinance now where anybody and their dog, you know, has the opportunity to put an ADU in there, and that's going to increase, you know, residential density, and the areas that are covered by Holladay water are not protected from that growth. And so, what am I missing?
So the way that we went about creating the different distinctions between those was we actually just took the service area of the entire water provider. So Salt Lake City Utilities, and that's why also the Jordan Valley Conservancy District is so small, because it serves so much space.
But they're also not protected from the same growth issues that would affect the residents that are covered by Salt Lake City Public Utilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yet Salt Lake City Public Utilities is the only one who's being subjected to deal with growth.
Yes, and the rest of them are also kind of maintaining the status quo to an extent for their users. Because we're looking at it from the city's level, we can do a couple of different things if we want to address that specifically. We can look at, basically we can divide up the city. What we did was we took the expected growth based on the future land use map, and we, pulled that in citywide, and that's what that dot or that line is. That's kind of what that looks like over time, up until 2065. So quite a ways out. That's kind of more of a build-up scenario. And then the behind that line is kind of dissociated from the future land use map. So exactly what you were saying. Some of those areas might be growing. They might be within the surface boundary of Jordan Valley, or they might be an area of Salt Lake Public Utilities. Salt Lake Public Utilities is over several of the areas that would be have growth. It just happens that way. But we could also go ahead and create that relationship if we need to, where we're showing, water as an
I'm trying to figure out the purpose of that map. Or what's that information is that providing to anyone that's meaningful? I mean, and we're saying that all of our growth is going to be happening on Holladay Hills, so that's where we've got the biggest growth of residents. Okay, that makes sense. But that's why I was trying to make sense of that. And I didn't want to have that to be justification for Holladay Water not to have to address potential growth in their service area.
They don't. They don't. Okay, example. So my daughter has a piece of property that she bought. She subdivided it. The home that she's in is serviced by Holladay Water. She's within that Holladay Water district. The second home that we built on the property is still in that district, but Holladay Water has a finite number of customers. So even though they're within that map, the new home is serviced by Salt Lake. So it's not a
Not a fixed
It's
geography sort
not
of thing.
fixed geography at all.
It's a fixed property owner. It's a fixed number of spigots.
The home service by Holladay Water has a third of the amount of, they pay about a third of the amount for the same amount of water as, so it's not like,
But they have a fixed number of spigots, essentially, not a fixed geography.
it's not, it's number of customers.
There's X number of shares, essentially you have to have a share at one of your services, is that right?
I'm sure about it. But, so there can't be a map.
Gotcha.
So is that what you were saying?
That's where my misunderstanding is.
I think a lot of people.
Yeah, because
From a company standpoint, remember Holladay Water still had way more. They've got like a legacy
yeah,
deal with it that a lot of the things.
gotcha.
So does that?
That clears it up entirely. Thank you.
One other piece too, and I think we talked a little bit about the legislative kind of impetus behind the water element is to increase engagement between the water providers and the city. And one piece of it is to have a water budget for the city. So while all of the service providers create their own budgets or whatever their service area is, it's unless that happens to align with the city boundary, it is almost never actually kind of aligning perfectly with the jurisdiction of the city, which means that there's a disconnect between things like our land use regulation that could impact water. So just one other little piece of that in terms of the why, because I know it feels a little odd and it's new, but that is one other little piece that's also included in the plan, so that it hopefully makes sense.
Is that it then?
Yeah.
A lot of silence. So, okay, so I guess between now and the 20th, we have an opportunity to go through. I don't think I've gone through it, admittedly, probably as thoroughly as you guys have been on this committee, so I'd like to have an opportunity to go through between now and the 20th, but I'm not expecting that I'm going to find anything that I think all the good work's been done between the committee and the 4 meetings with the planning commission, and I'm not sure I'm going to find out anything that I want to change. So, but if we've got questions or concerns, we should address them with you guys between now and then, and otherwise it's going to be teed up for a vote on the 20th.
And that's a great, I concur with you, but the great thing about it, John, is that portal where it's kind of like a current online textbook about Holladay. Yeah, it's like a college textbook, but in the modern era, not from an Irish book. But that's kind of its feel. That's utility. It's great.
All right.
Good. Thank you.
John, thanks. Delaney, thank you so much, and to your team. And look forward to voting this thing. Red, I think you're next. Welcome back. Thank you.
Hey, Jamie, or the email I just sent you. Sorry. Yeah, I got it.
Moving.
That's interesting.
All right, I'll just do just a brief introduction to the reason why Fred is here again. Thank you for coming again. So at your retreat probably 2 years ago, one of the items we addressed was the need to update our business license fee schedule, just to make sure that they were competitive, and then to address other communities have been moving toward a simplified business license fee schedule. Ours has been fairly complicated. So about a year ago, we engaged Fred's firm, LRB, which will always be Lewis Young to me. And he's been working with us and with our partner agencies for the last year-ish.
Yes. Yes, I'll go through our preliminary findings relative to the work we've done. The objective this evening is to get feedback from you on approach and determine if there's any other considerations we need to look at, alternative scenarios, anything like that, as we look to finalize and prepare a final schedule for the business side of things. So with regards to code, we're following sections of code that allow for the administration of a business license to monitor businesses. We can also look at disproportionate costs when evaluating business licensing. In order to work through this process, you have to have an ordinance in place that goes through and defines the fees and business groupings, and we also have to have essentially a study that calculates those costs, that brings the cost and the fee and creates a nexus between those. The purpose of the study is to ensure that the fees are reasonable relative to cost and define all of the elements that go into that fee calculation. Other important elements are some restrictions related to business licensing. So you cannot require a business license for a business that is operating occasionally or by an individual who's under the age of 18. You can also, you cannot assess against home occupations unless they opt in. So there are many home occupations that choose to be licensed for tax purposes or other purposes. Or you may have home occupations that you actually, you can show that there's an off-site being taxed that business above the residential component of that home-based business. Most entities in the past had all home occupation businesses licensed, and then there was a change in the statute, and now most entities do not license home occupations unless they fit within this definition or request that. There's some other requirements here related to home-based business, but essentially those are the big elements that we look at is age and frequency, as well as home occupation impact. Alrighty, so here when we look at a fee study as it relates to any sort of development fees, planning or zoning fees or business license fees, this is our typical process. We have two pillars to this one methodology. The pillar on the left here is our cost analysis, where we are bringing in cost components from your budgets, which include salary information, department overhead costs, administrative overhead expenses, and we are essentially getting a fully weighted cost per minute by employee, so that we can take that and apply it to the second pillar, which is a process analysis. We request data from staff and say, okay, let's look at all of the applications that will run through your office, and let's establish a process map for that. Essentially, it's a list of tasks that we need to go through to complete that application. Once we have that defined, we apply the personnel involved and the time associated with that and bring those two together to establish a fee for each of the applications that we're looking at. In that process, there may be consolidation of fees. We may expand fees or identify new categories, but these are the pillars that govern our methodology for fee evaluation.
That include like if we have to have internal specialized software for tracking or executing AUS, does that would be like the department overhead costs would be like their facility cost essentially to document?
Yes, or material, supplies, training, anything associated with the function of that department, which would be applied to the employee that may be involved in licensing. And then on the administrative side, you'll have functions within the city that serve the departments as a holistic service. Finance, IT, HR, risk management. Those are really functions that benefit the departments and are allocated in that fully weighted cost per minute. We look at that cost side of this. So here's a little bit more of a description here. As we look at the cost analysis, our base cost is the employee salary and benefits. That's essentially the direct cost of each individual. The department overhead, again, as we discussed, is the general cost there, and the administrative overhead we talked about. All right, so here's an example of a process map. This is a general business license fee example. We're essentially saying, okay, what are the steps? Those steps 1 through 10. What is the action item? The estimated time associated with each of those, and the personnel involved. If there are elements where we have multiple people involved, we determine if it's an and statement or an or statement. So if it's and, we sum up that time. If it's an or statement, we average that time. It's difficult to get a proven weighted average because that time it will be specific to the application and varies from application to application. And some entities, what I wanted to point out here, these are estimates of time spent based on total time spent. Most entities do not have a specific, time tracking software that tracks every minute. So we have to make some assumptions here of what time it takes to go through an application and process that. And this is an example of that process map. Alrighty, so here are the findings of that based on the process maps that were provided. We do have the non-regulated home occupation. That is a process map we need to fix. That actually you would have no fee or a minor fee there relative to what we described at the beginning. So that would be one where we'd actually set it to minimal amount based on the statutory requirement. But here you have home occupation daycares that may need, that have a process map specific to those types of home occupations, so that would fit within that outside impact. General business license, that would be a new application. We're estimating at almost $300 per new business application, whereas a renewal, that would be estimated at $87. So this would be different, potential change in your current fee structure. So right now, the way the city operates is you assess the same fee regardless of whether it's a new business or a renewal business. And what we're proposing here is that you would actually have a difference there because the renewal is quicker, it's easier to process, and so the time associated with that is less than a new application, and that's expressed in that cost there for new businesses versus a renewal. And then you have some specific businesses that require a different process. While the majority of your businesses fall under the general business license or the general renewal, you do have these other licenses, restaurants with alcohol, a food truck, rental dwellings, assisted living, massage businesses. So they have specific processes that are associated with that application, and there would be a separate fee for that type.
Are our fees currently different for all of those different categories? Or?
Some of them are. So right now, your business license schedule, there are a lot of different business groupings, but it's not broken out in, at least your schedule doesn't show a base fee versus some of the other fees that we're going to talk about, the disproportionate fees. And the business groupings don't necessarily line up with your actual business license database. So it created some challenges for us to make comparisons to your current fee schedule versus what we're proposing, because there's just a lot of changes relative to them.
And this is just cost to go through the licensure process, right?
Yes.
Like impact fees, or
correct.
That's a separate animal. Yeah.
Yes, this is essentially saying, based on the process map, what is the time associated with processing that license, and let's calculate the cost for it.
And this is specific to Holladay.
Yes. Yep.
Yes, I mean, editorial comment, but so if somebody runs a really inefficient department,
yes, there's no incentive, right?
they're gonna, they're just passing that cost along to the business owner.
Yes. Yeah.
Does your firm, have you done a study unique salaries?
They're not as common, but I have done several studies. Yeah. And this slide is usually not the sticky point. So it's the next slide that we can talk about that are really where the crux of the discussion falls. But yes, that could be an issue if there's inefficiencies, perceived inefficiencies or actual, that would be passed on, right, through this process. So that's something you have to evaluate to determine do we feel like we're.
I know, I think we're probably great.
Yeah,
compared to other
guess
places, but
yeah.
it just seems odd to me that somebody's not incentivized to, because the bottom line is the sum of those numbers should not exceed what your overhead is, right?
Correct.
It shouldn't be a profit center for your city, and I don't think it should be.
Correct. Yeah.
But I was just thinking about that. It's like, well, if somebody just overstaffs their department, they're just passing that cost on to the local businesses, which seems. But anyway, getting back to that slide. So the bottom line is there's an initial cost to get going, which absolutely makes sense to me because there's a lot of things that you have to check off to make sure, hey, they're running a safe business. Then after that, it's like we don't need to go through all that stuff again. So there's just kind of a minimal administrative fee to renew the license. Yes. That makes sense to me.
Yes.
What is the rent for
An apartment.
Oh, it's an apartment.
Yes.
It's not an ADU.
No, but maybe what about here?
Yes.
That's
Short-term rental is not.
Oh, it's a therapy.
So, and there's a specific definition statute relative to rentals. This would typically does not include accessory buildings. It's 3+ apartments.
How is this that are insurance on?
No, these people go around. They're all supposed to be licensed, right? Am I reading this right? That the general only applies to the general business license category.
Yes.
I mean, I know you said that there's so many differences between the categories that we have now in these categories, but as far as the numbers, are people, if should this be approved, going to just be like, oh my gosh, my fee went up exponentially? Are we in a similar range?
Yeah, so just the base elements, you would actually probably see the business would see a savings, right? Because you're going from a general commercial license to a renewal approach, which that is a reduced fee. But the challenge is the current fee schedule, again, does not break it out like this. It's all just one fee, which my estimate is your current fee schedule includes some of the disproportionate fees associated with each business grouping, again, which we're going to talk about in the next slides. But I can't really break that out and determine what was calculated previously, and we just have the final fee schedule. But this, based on some of the data we received relative to the number of new business licenses and the renewals, you would generate, if this is the only thing you assess, was just the renewal and the base fees, you would experience a revenue loss as it relates to business license revenue. So I believe you generate on average about $280,000 in business license revenue. This would produce somewhere between $120,000 to $130,000 in revenue. So that's from a revenue comparison. Again, we also look at then the personnel, the primary personnel assigned to this function and department overhead. And so we do balance that and say, okay, are we covering at least our base when it comes to the base fee and the renewal fee? Ultimately, what's happening is, again, your current fee structure accounts for that base plus some, which is the disproportionate fee evaluations, and that's how you get up to the 280 on average in revenue that you're generating right now. If we apply the disproportionate analysis, we can show that you far exceed the 280,000 in revenue, and so now it's a question of where do we land relative to the final fee assessment. So let's jump to the next slide. Alrighty, so I've kind of thrown out this term, disproportionate fees. What that means is, and the statute talks about disproportionate fees. There's really not a clear definition in statute of what the precise meaning of disproportionate impacts are. What we do is we look at that from a calls for service perspective and based on any regulatory elements or defined services that the city may provide. So in some instances, for example, you may have a business district or an area where you provide increased beautification to a specific set of businesses, and you could potentially pass that direct cost on to those businesses in that geographic area.
There could be an instance where you maybe have increased government services like snowplow for a specific area, and those businesses could be assessed that disproportionate impact.
Or Christmas lights.
Yes, or Christmas lights could be an element. We're saying, hey, that's a disproportionate service, and maybe that's something we want to pass on to a geographic area. A lot of times it's geographic specific. The challenge with that can be trying to parse out the benefit of that type of service, right? So Christmas lights, it may be geographically located, but it benefits the entire community, or that's the perception. So there is a little bit of challenge associated with this evaluation of disproportionate impacts. Most entities focus on public safety, essentially, and say, okay, let's look at calls for service, and that is a primary function within the general fund, and we're going to evaluate disproportionate impacts from that perspective. I have had a few communities that look beyond that, but it's pretty specific. So what we do is we look at calls for service provided by UPD and UFA, and we apply that to the business groupings either through a geocoding process, or UFA provided call data and provided us information relative to the land use that those calls for service should be applied to. We then take that calls for service data and apply it to our business groupings as found in our business license database, and then calculate averages. Essentially, we take the average for all of your businesses, and then based on that average, we evaluate individual business groupings and determine, are there more calls in a specific grouping than there are relative to the average. So, for example, if on average your business has produced 3 calls per business per year, any business grouping that exceeded the average of 3 calls per business per year would be considered disproportionate. We then calculate the difference between that. Let's say in my business grouping I had 5, we would have 2 calls per service on average above the citywide average, and then recalculate a cost per call for that disproportionate impact.
And the calls you said were public safety related?
Yes.
So we're not looking at anything other than police and fire?
Correct.
So was that established already in the fees we saw on the previous pages? Okay. Okay, good.
Yeah. So
I think where you're going with this is you've reassessed the labor of the business licensing, and it's actually a lot less than what we're collecting, but now you're going to show us numbers.
Yeah.
So I think a perfect example might be, I can see where it's going.
Yeah.
It's like,
that's why I asked my previous question about impact fees.
Yeah. And there are some other considerations that we think about. So this is not final. Yeah, I feel like there's going to be a huge mic drop. I do want to point out that this is for all business groupings, as well as we did evaluate rental units, and we need to talk a little bit about that. But here we take the business groupings, so this is based on your business license database, and we apply these groupings to the calls for service either through a geocoding process or comparison of the land use types that UFA provided. The majority of your businesses fall within business, professional, and contracted services. There's 404 businesses there. You've got personal services that account for 231 of those.
What are businesses?
Like a haircutting salon, those types of things.
so basically, you're saying that their original fee in your deal field covers their cost. They don't have a disproportionate.
Look at the calls per business. Generally, and they're at average or below when we look at all businesses.
What do you mean by the cost per business and cost per unit? What's the unit designation?
Yeah, so in some instances, we've looked at a different unit demand unit, like hotels here. We looked at the number of rooms.
Gotcha.
So that spreads it out a little bit. So if you have a smaller unit count, like in an assisted living, for example, it can scale relative to that demand unit. That's like here under nursing, residential, and personal care. The cost per business would be averaged at $44,000 per business, but if you apply it per room in a smaller care facility, you got to pay less. So when we look at, again, those two large buckets, there isn't a disproportionate impact, but you can see in some of the other categories, there's a pretty hefty disproportionate impact. So convenience stores often have high call ratios. There's a large number of calls that go there. So that's not surprising. Entertainment, grocery stores, hotels, assisted living, and this is combined, both police and fire. So we're not showing you the tables. In some instances, we have no disproportionate impacts in police, but we have disproportionate impacts in fire, or the flip side of that.
And are you looking at the actual cost of those calls, or are you using the number of calls? Because there are going to be some businesses that have higher infrastructure needs, they have water use or something like that, or make that to recapturing that.
So the cost per call is based on an average using the budgets associated with fire and police service in total. So saying, okay, what is our contract amount? What are we paying for that service? And then let's look at the total calls for service that are covered by that contract. So
you're looking at those actual costs associated with public safety. You're not using it as a factor of overall cost.
No, yeah, it is directly related to public safety and those contracts associated with that. And that's generalized.
And there's no baseline that says like where this is above and beyond, above and beyond, or is it?
Yes, so this represents the cost above that average. Okay. So again, if we're allotting 3 calls per business on average, they get that as part of the base. Anything that exceeds that is calculated here.
But it's per business. That seems very, you take a food truck versus a nursing home, right?
Yes, which is why we have separate business groupings. Okay. But yeah, the average is business-wide. We're saying on average, this is a baseline level of service for a business community, essentially, in total. But then when we look at the calculation of the disproportionate impacts, we split it up into business groupings to say, okay, what does this group look like? We don't, in any sort of averaging analysis, there is going to be winners and losers, right? You're averaging to a middle point. And so by expanding groupings, you can create more equity. By collapsing groups or combining those, you create maybe less equity, but more administrative ease, right?
So I just want to make sure that I understand. So when you're comparing it to the average of the city, so you're not saying like these grocery stores based on all other grocery stores in the area. It's how much disproportionate impact the grocery stores have relative to all of the
combined businesses. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and there are some challenges in the past. 10 years ago, these studies would focus on a base relative to a residential average. Saying, okay, let's set our single-family residential as our base level of service, and then compare everything to that. But my thought was that that's pretty conservative, because usually your residential units has a lower call per unit, and so it was pushing these fees up even higher. So we shifted to saying, well, let's look at that commercial average. But this isn't, there's many ways to look at this. Again, the statute doesn't tell us how to define disproportionate impacts or what to include in disproportionate impacts. This is how essentially the standard of practice has evolved to look at assessing that disproportionate impact.
So what you did is kind of industry standard.
Yes, this is very common relative to what entities will do to evaluate disproportionate impacts. Now that's a little bit loaded, right? Because we do those studies, so we're perpetuating that methodology. But there are other businesses, other consulting groups that I know and have seen their products as well, and it's focused on this same methodology here, of evaluating disproportionate impacts from this perspective. And I'll also point out that these are typical categories that will rise to the top when it comes to disproportionate impacts. So convenience stores, hotels, nursing homes, pharmacy, drugstores, restaurants, those all have high use and therefore high calls for service.
So Frank, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So this would be a new philosophy of how to charge fees to businesses in Holladay, correct? Like right now, we're not.
There is some of this baked into your current fee schedule. So looking at your fees, for example, right now you assess convenience stores a fee of $1,750.
And they're going to go to $12,000.
Yes. So the fee
That's
is
pretty
going
shocking.
Yes. Yes.
So I think what we're doing here is, well, here's how I look at it. So you're saying that if we reassign the fees on the prior graph the way they should be justified, we would lose $140,000 in revenue. And, right? From 280 to 120.
Yes.
Do we have a justification for collecting $280,000?
More than that. Yes, this side of the equation.
So, okay, so.
If everybody was paying their fair share, then yes, it'd be a lot more.
Okay, so.
Is that right?
Yes, well, I want to be careful though, because there are multiple things to consider, right? This is an evaluation in a fishbowl, essentially. We're saying, hey, let's look at our base fees and our disproportionate fees specific to business licensing without considering other revenue generation that is generated within the general fund. For example, property taxes are collected, and there is a formula that provides exemption for residential properties versus commercial properties. So your commercial businesses pay 100% of their valuation, whereas residential pays 55% of that valuation. In addition, commercial properties through your residents pay sales tax revenues. So there's revenue generation that comes from these businesses. So we need to be careful. Yes, from some. Yes.
So if we think we're justified in collecting those fees, that we're not fleecing our businesses, that we're just trying to cover our costs at $280,000, and I think it's probably more. But let's say it's $280,000. If we're very uncomfortable with this disproportionate analysis, then we basically have to reassign those fees to the other table, and somebody else is going to pick up that subsidy, right?
Yeah, so if you said, well, we don't want disproportionate fees at all,
yeah,
then there could be a revenue loss that would have to be made up by some other funding mechanism, right?
Yeah.
So if you lose revenue, either you change the level of service or you make that revenue up somewhere else. And what I wanted to highlight is some of this is baked into your current fee structure. So you're assessing disproportionate fees. It's all just wrapped under one set fee schedule that doesn't vary from a new business to a renewal business. So what some entities will look at is say, okay, we understand what's happening here, the pieces that are moving around. Now let's look at what do we want to do from a revenue perspective? Do we want to increase revenues? Do we want to remain revenue neutral? Saying, okay, if we generated $280,000 on average, we want the schedule of our base fees and our disproportionate fees to generate that amount to ensure that we're not losing revenue from a general fund perspective. Others will say, no, we recognize that there are disproportionate impacts and we want to cover some of that cost. What's happening here is essentially a shift in obligation. So we're saying instead of general taxes covering public safety services, we are now saying business licensing helps cover some of that cost, those disproportionate impacts, which either frees up capacity in the general fund because now we're generating some more revenue. So, for example, that previous discussion we had relative to the general fund sustainability, where we're saying, hey, we need to raise property taxes potentially to create sustainability relative to inflation. An alternative approach is to evaluate fees and say, well, let's look at all of our fee assessments, and instead of doing a general property tax increase, we do a specific fee increase. So the application of that fee is specific to businesses in this case, rather than being universal, a tax that covers your whole general fund. So that's another way to look at this, is it's a reallocation of proportionate impact within the general fund and shifting it from general taxes to this fee category.
And is this kind of, does it end up being an all or nothing philosophy?
No, yeah, so so I completed a study with South Jordan, and they saw these same numbers. Whenever we present these types of disproportionate impacts, the fees for these categories are high. When you look at the calls for service and the cost per call, it is inevitable that those costs are high. And their approach was, well, no, we want to keep our business community healthy. And they looked at capping those fees at a certain amount. They said, we're not going to let a fee get above $3,000. So let's proportionally adjust those fees to keep it within a reasonable perspective. And then we would check that against the revenue generation. Say, are we generating a lot more revenue under that preferred fee schedule? Are we generating the same amount? Are we experiencing a loss? So entities will look at it with that lens of, sales tax revenues and property tax generation and economic development and say, yeah, this may represent the maximum we could assess, but we're not going to do that.
Let me ask a question right there. And this is just brainstorming. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not showing my hand. Because I know every time you change your fee structures, you have to go through this consulting process. Is that a true statement? Or where I'm getting at is could you ramp over several years without having to do a cost study every year? Because one of my initial objections to this was, what's the cost of the study relative to the increased revenue?
Yes.
And if the cost of the study is more than the increased revenue, why do we change our fees at all?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if a single study now, since we've got it, we could use this one study to ramp fees gradually over time without having to do a study every time.
Yes.
Is that a possibility?
Yes, and entities will do that. Say, well, we're not comfortable with the maximum. They'll establish a policy relative to a maximum, and then a starting point. So over the next 3 years or 5 years, we're going to get to that fee level. So there's nothing that prevents you from doing that other than, you can't bind potentially
Future councils, right. Right.
So
But we wouldn't have to redo a study every year if we went into a ramp method.
Yeah.
So I think your options are to not go with this disproportionate because it's too shocking and just say we're going to eat it out of the general fund.
This is what we're currently doing, essentially.
Well, that's what,
Well, no, I think,
we said 280 is what we're currently collected,
Yes.
and 120 is what's within the disproportionate.
And Fred,
Yeah.
what is the total of the,
Yes.
the base plus
Yes,
disproportionate?
so if we add in the disproportionate as shown here and apply to the business groupings, the revenue generation would go to 940,000. Sorry.
It's a lot more.
Yes.
Well, the thing that keeps bringing on, I can't remember if it was a fire school or where, but like the time that UFA spends at a nursing facility, I think moving people, essentially.
Picking them up off the floor.
And it's like, nursing facilities are great and everything, but
So
service,
yeah, I mean, to put that into context, the majority of that revenue generation is from that specific category, is nursing facility.
Yeah, but at the same time, they don't add additional like hotel taxes or sales taxes.
Right.
And those are the businesses I'm a little more concerned about, the disproportionate use.
Yeah.
I'm also concerned about the nursing homes because that's the cost of housing for the elderly folks who live there. But on the other hand, those are extremely profitable businesses who don't adequately staff in order to pick up their residents when they fall on the floor. They call.
they want to help their bottom line on purpose. I just said it. But do we know what our actual costs that we have to cover are? Like if 280, do we actually know if we say 280s, that's what we collected, but we're not covering it. Do we know what that number is?
That's a little more challenging because again, there are 3 components to that.
That's not just here, it's UPD and UFA. We're adding those costs in.
In theory, it's something close to that.
Yes, yeah, when I look at, to be sensitive relative to salary information, looking at just the primary personnel involved in business licensing is your business license administrator. And that would be that direct cost, right? There's not there is time associated with other functions in those process maps. But that's, taking that cost plus some department overhead and some administrative overhead would fill up that bucket of that $140,000 of cost there.
See, I think we should, I don't think we should reduce that number from the 280 and start coming up with general fund dollars, because we've already got challenges. We're already going to run up against some challenges the next 3 or 4 years because of flattening out sales tax, and so I think we should be really careful about just giving up our general fund dollars. But on the same token, this is not meant to be a profit center to the city.
No.
We should collect what we're justified in collecting, and so but I don't want to go. I don't want to go to a convenience store and say,
right,
"Oh, sorry, you just went from $1,200 to $12,000," or
that's why I asked the ramp question, is maybe we can set some caps and ramp to it over time.
Is there a way to do a hybrid where we take the prior table that's 120 that we think is justified for those businesses, and then is there a hybrid model where we can say, we want to try to see if we can make up the 140,000 through a disproportionate analysis of some kind?
Yes, and as a reminder, that is what you're doing now, right? It's most likely you're covering your costs plus disproportionate impacts, which is how you're getting the fee schedule you have. So
I don't think any of this suggests a profit center, but rather cost recapture for public safety.
It's a redistribution. It's saying instead of using one tool, we use an alternative tool which frees up this other tool for the other elements that we've been discussing. So that's how entities will look at this, is if we have a need to recover costs and maintain a level of service, what tools will we use to do that? This is one of them. It will shift the recovery to a business license fee through the form of a disproportionate fee, which then allows you to do other things with your other tools, right, and manipulate those in different ways.
So did your analysis ever look at how our fee schedule would compare to other municipalities?
We can do that. We haven't done that yet, but that is something we can provide.
Yeah, because I know Riverton does something very much like this.
Yep. And South Jordan's fees, they didn't adopt the maximum. In most entities, and there are some that actually do get to that level, especially for department stores or high growth communities that have substantial impacts with limited tax base. I've seen entities adopt these fees, and you can get, a large department store, and that type of fee doesn't affect the profit margin that much. Right? So it just depends on the community and your objectives, but some have fairly high fees, and others choose to bring those down.
Yeah, and the other thing would be, I agree with Robin that it's a shock, particularly to those businesses that are providing all kinds of revenue through other channels, the sales tax primarily.
They're providing sales tax and they pay property taxes. So what do you say to them when they say, now my business, but wait a second.
Because everybody pays
property taxes paying for police and fire too?
You say you have a disproportionate impact.
Yeah, that's the disproportionate impact, right? Exactly.
And that's where I wonder, like, from a 80-20 rule, instead of, nursing homes, take that example, right? Are there the big, the big ones that we can look at and say, what I worry about is, of course they're going to give it if it's free, but what could they be doing at what price if they had some motivation to do it otherwise, right? And how much could that free up then to start using resources?
And I think that is a great point relative to the purpose of the fee, is to actually incentivize action, to do something different, to make changes. Now, we don't want to disincentivize businesses in the community from using public safety, because there's a community benefit to reporting and calling officers to come in. So we don't want that to happen. So there definitely is a balance from that perspective. But that should be a purpose and a perspective of these types of fees. It's not in perpetuity, but how do we create a policy that incentivizes people to take action and make improvements.
Well, so I guess and maybe this is just what you're saying is we don't want to disincentivize people from using public safety, but I'm wondering, so if they have this disproportionate impact, so they assess a higher fee, but then just like with the WUI thing, if they then engage in mitigating practices, so like they hire somebody that can lift 250 pounds, and so they're all of a sudden not calling on you, okay, but like if they make changes over time, can they then lower the fee? Like, can we do something like that where it can?
Yeah, so going back to the comment of, how can we do these studies? Again, you can phase those in, and then entities will go through updates every several years, 5 years. It just depends on the nature of the assumptions, and if you feel there's a change, then that could trigger an update of the study. Right now, again, I work with South Jordan quite a bit on their fee schedule, and they'll update their development fees every 2 or 3 years, but their business license, they sat on for a little bit longer and kind of phase it in.
I don't see the detail of this on 900,000 and the C and by category.
Yeah, I'll make copies of this and send out. So I only got one copy, so
yeah.
I don't mind reading it with you.
Well, mostly just to go through and say, okay, what are the big ones that needs to be done? Yes, right.
It's the you're right.
I agree with you on the assisted living places are the best example, because I think they do purposely
abuse the system.
Blame them. It's the recipient provide.
Yeah, here.
The problem is the policy.
When somebody falls out of bed,
right,
and their first option is a 911 call to put them back in bed, that's a problem.
So in terms of policy direction and options for your next meeting, I'm curious whether there are things you would like to see. Like, Mayor, it sounds like you'd like to see a scenario where basically we're balancing base and disproportionate to be budget neutral. So you're staying within that 280 amount.
Well, I don't know where the 280 comes from. I'm just saying.
This is our current revenue generation.
Yeah, that's arbitrary.
That's arbitrary.
Right. I know this is but that aspires towards, but doesn't disincentivize like that.
Yeah, could there be a disproportionate revenue impact, like for those that are generating sales tax for the city? Could that be brought into it where you're giving a break to the convenience stores and the restaurants, the hotels that bring in disproportionate impact in terms of revenue, whereas the nursing homes don't have that same thing? So
yeah, that's what and so they limited it based on a cap, but also a different percentage increase for sales tax generators versus non-sales tax. It said, those that generate sales tax, we're not going to let that increase exceed 5%, or I don't recall the exact percentage, but there was a cap for sales tax generators versus non-sales tax generators.
I'm liking where that's going.
Yeah, I think so. Where we're heading is I like the first chart because I think I think people should pay what you're justified. But then the disproportionate thing, is there a way for us to massage it to where it's not 900,000 that we're in? That seems capture our expenses, but is there a hybrid model where we think we can maybe get a little bit more surgical about where we're going to extract those funds?
And is there a fact that you would like to see in any disproportionate categories?
Is there a way, like I was saying, it varies by category, so that we're not just like making our fees so high that we're priced out of the market, really, for having.
Well, that also brings in the what the other municipalities are doing nearby.
Yeah.
Because they're going to know where to go.
Highest fee is per business is about $3,000 for department stores, and for movie theaters.
Well, that's an annual renewal.
Yes. So the department store is $2,975, and the movie theater is $2,925.
What's the
What group is that in? Yeah, what is that? Entertainment group? Oh, entertainment.
Nursing, residential, and personal care is $200 base, but plus $44 per resident. So it's based on population.
What we could consider with nursing homes is do it per resident.
So I don't know that we have the data on, number.
Well, they got rooms.
We do have the number.
Well, that you're right.
Rooms, same thing.
The 740.
The idea of the tiers for renewal versus new license is proportionate.
So the disproportionate fee would be annual. It doesn't matter if you're a new business or a renewal, that's the disproportionate impact of the business itself. It's the base fee that would shift relative to a new business versus a renewal.
You charge the base and the disproportionate.
Yes. Yeah. Again, that mirrors what you do now. It's just, it's not split out that way. Your current fee schedule doesn't break it out like that. So that's how most entities, when they adopt a disproportionate fee, show it that way. Show the base cost, which covers what you're talking about there, which is the base cost of processing versus the disproportionate impacts, which is also a cost. So we want to make sure we don't confuse that. That is a cost to the city. Yeah. It's just we're allocating that cost to this process rather than a different revenue stream.
What's our time frame here?
I mean.
SEP.
Items that we had really hoped for this council to resolve.
Well, I
will say we had some issues, some data issues with one of our partners that really delayed this process, so that's something we'll have to deal with separately. But if this could be a question for the new council, or this could be something.
Well, I don't. I'm just wondering if there's, based on where we're at with this conference, and obviously I'm trying to push this along because I know,
I turn into a pumpkin.
That's right.
Well, if we also take the ramping model, where we don't capture it all at once and to reduce the shock, then it's going to inherently involve future councils too.
I think we need to get it right, not rush it.
Yeah.
But if we could do it this year, I'm not opposed to that. I'm just wondering what we could have next on the 20th. What could we propose at the 20th that we think will move us closer to getting a decision? It sounds like we need to massage this disproportionate.
Well, I'd like to know more about the South Jordan, because that was getting real interesting, how they seemed to be massaging the same way that I was anticipating in my questions.
So we could look at that, and then we could, I also heard maybe not to exceed like a reasonable amount of growth, whatever reasonable ends up being. We could look at a couple of options for that.
My only issue with that is reasonable for me would be, do you mean reasonable like a cap on all of them, or?
Think what the revenue is on a nursing home. Annual revenue on a nursing home, right? Is it $4,000 a month per person or whatever? It's a ton.
Well, I'm okay capping. I just was wondering if, when you say cap, do you mean we're going to cap it at 5,000 and nothing goes over that, or for each category? I think that's what we should do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what we should do, and then work our way into making sure we're costs are covered. But I think, look, it's not going to be my problem. I get it, but I think the council should be very careful about just
going nuts.
1,000 cuts out of our general fund, because I think there's going to be enough challenges down the road. So I don't think we should be subsidizing this out of our general fund. I think we should capture our costs, but 950,000 is too much.
Yeah.
I think we ought to work on that, bring something back that's where we can cap some of those categories and
see what's easily justified.
Yeah. But I agree. I don't want to have a $3,000 cap and not being able to charge more to the nursing home, because I think that's probably the biggest problem.
Yeah.
I don't think it was by category for sure.
So
I would love to see not just South Jordan, but our neighbors, like Mill Creek and Conway Heights and.
Yeah, I'd love to see those comps.
Yeah.
If they've gone through this sort of exercise generally too.
Some more have gone through it.
Yeah.
Mill Creek definitely has
I would doubt that one. But probably Mill Creek, and I know Riverton, and that's maybe South Jordan.
I think basically just on public safety, I get it, but it's sort of an imperfect measure of what the impact of a business really is. I don't know if there are other ways to include like infrastructure needs and wear and tear on roads and. Yeah, this is like, you bring up a great point that I've always wondered, about, which is the true cost benefit analysis of business.
It's very complicated.
And yes, it is very challenging. We do those studies on an individual basis, but even those are not all encompassing. If you truly calculate and study the cost of all of your businesses relative to the benefit for all services, it becomes outside the scope of what we do.
So no, I'm not clear on the 280 number. Do we have a way to, I think because what we're trying to do is, we've got the 120, right? We want to make sure we can capture whatever the delta is on, but I'm not sure what that is. But that's what I'd like to do, is create a disproportional cost matrix that captures that cost.
Yes, we can calculate that. So I've got that in my, it's one of my tasks is saying, if we essentially did an adjustment to this fee schedule across the board to make us budget neutral, what would that look?
That's what I'd love to see.
And I think Ty would like to see something that
aspires for more.
Yeah.
All through the 280 is capturing our costs.
Yeah, particularly when you're talking about public safety, it's not even close.
Yeah, but is there a way to quantify that?
We have.
Is it 960?
Yeah.
In the ballpark of 960.
Yeah.
That was from this perspective again. We said, well, no, the true analysis has to do with the base or average calls we're aligned per business. So right now we're assuming an average across all businesses, and I'm throwing out that 3 number because I think that's what it was for police. But that hypothetical 3 calls for service, if you push that up and said, no, we're going to give every business 5 calls, then this would go down because we just gave them more calls relative to the base. So it's influenced by the methodology and how we apply that, and that goes back to your question of what is the true cost benefit of business, and that's where you really settle in on what that base number looks like. That is very difficult to do and really outside of the scope of a business license study. So we try to apply a reasonable average relative to that base application, recognizing that most entities will have this discussion of what's appropriate relative to these other considerations.
But it's not ever going to be perfect.
No,
never will. But I'd like to have that consideration of disproportionate revenue impact, so sales taxpayers, and then have a ramping as well, where we kind of set targets, from 280 to 350 to 5 to 600, and ramp up over a longer period.
So is there anything, what can we look at next meeting that will move us closer to a decision?
So I've heard 2 scenarios, a budget neutral scenario from you and maybe an aspirational scenario that includes perhaps some recognition of revenue contribution, and maybe some staggering over a period, ramping up over a period of time.
And probably too, if we could get a column to the right that shows a couple of, like if South Salt Lake's a good example, just to give us a reference of what other, where other people are at with their fees they're charging.
No, I'm taking notes, not texting.
Right.
There are some points of caution that might inform the information that you want when you make a decision. I think we have to be very careful about not overcharging anybody. what I mean is the balance between what you're charging them and what's in this analysis. There are lawsuits over the last, not decade, where cities have charged for water, cities have charged impact fees that relate to public safety, things that to me seem really similar to what this analysis is getting at. And the developers in those instances have gone back and said, your analysis said we would use X units, and we used X minus however many units. And they have won judgments that require a refund as part of the city. So I would just urge you to be a little bit careful about that, about don't go right to the wall.
Oh, no, I don't think
that's right? And then related to that, I think you have other revenue sources that are used to pay for emergency services. I think you probably need to appropriate into the analysis what those revenue sources are. And if you're factoring into this 100% of the demand of the use of those resources, then what is that going to be? What is it for you? Also collecting. And then on the fire side, what I don't know is of those calls to service to the nursing or elderly care facilities, they may be passing some of those costs on to the person that they're helping. What costs them? At times they will build an individual. Do you have
only for ambulance service, for transport? For transport.
I don't know.
And is transport factored into this at all, or is it just?
No, it should just be the cost of paying.
Okay. Well, I'm anxious to move along here, so have we got what we need to get a refined presentation next week that will start moving us closer to a decision?
I think we have. I'm just going to say, from my perspective, I think we'll want to do some public engagement. If we had clear direction this evening, I think we could have accomplished that by the end of the year. And since you want to look at additional information, I think you could make this decision, but it might be easier for the next council to make the
I'm not interested. I'm not worried one bit about rushing a vote on this. I'm not worried about getting it to another council. I think we want to get it right.
Yep.
Okay.
But I think we need to keep it going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Rick. Yeah, of course.
We've got most of the other council here, so you're up to speed.
What?
So now she's up to speed already.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, the Title III discussion will split down and cover that last so we can work with our developers here. You guys want to pop up and we'll. That's how we should tell. Did I see him? Yeah.
This selection.
And I just want to complete the next table.
No, I don't.
Make sure.
We don't have. We have no ones for here. Is this one? It might not work. You can try. Just one of them.
I think you've been using the one from my office.
Yeah.
We're not getting enough feed.
Always today. Go for And while she's doing that, I can just give a brief overview of what we're going to talk about. And then I think we'll have Mac Woodbury talk a little bit about the proposal from his perspective. And then maybe we'll spend some time, Jamie, talking about the agreement and some questions. So something, further clarification on the agreement I think we want to talk about before the council considers it for adoption. So as a brief overview and a reminder, When the Cottonwood Mall Urban Area Renewal Project was created in 2008, we agreed to provide 100 units of affordable housing at or below 80% AMI. Through agreement, we have delegated 50 of those units to the developer as part of our agreement to develop land, or ADL, in exchange for 20% of the increment that's generated over time in that project area. And we have 13 years remaining. We've been collecting increment. And at this point, I think we have $800,000 that's been collected since 2020. The remainder of that 100 units, 50 units, remains the responsibility of the city. And so we've been talking with this developer and with Steve Peterson for the better part of 2 years, I would say, about options to fulfill that responsibility for 100 units. And to be fair, when I say we've been talking for 2 years, we've been meeting regularly and certainly been talking about it for a much longer time frame than that. Recently, in the last 3 or 4 months, the developers have come to us with a proposal that would commit all 100 units in Block D of the Cottonwood Mall project area to fulfill the requirements of that tech committee. And they would do that in exchange for not only the 20% increment that is coming to them as part of the ADL, but with an additional $2.5 million that the RDA would contribute. $500,000 of increment that's been collected in the Cottonwood Mall project area, and $2 million that was previously collected and that we are holding in reserve from the Mill Rock project area. So
that has to be used for that purpose.
It has to be used for affordable housing purposes. And that sum of money has a different time clock on it. We have many, many time clocks. That one, I think, needs to be extended by 2028. So we're coming up on the deadline for use of that $2 million. So that's kind of the 30,000-foot explanation of what's being proposed. There are a number of policy questions for you to consider. That is in your staff report. And then we have, the mayor and I had a chance to speak this afternoon. We have some additional questions about the agreement that we want to talk about. But before we get into that, I thought we'd turn some time over to Mac.
Thank you all for considering this and moving forward where we are. This came up as we were moving forward, working with the tenants, trying to we're trying to get started on this parking structure here next to, not sure, but yeah, I know, I'm just not sure what I'm supposed to. So, I think we have signed a lease. So Lifetime Fitness, we signed a lease. Went on an ADA. We moved forward trying to, we negotiated Lifetime for over 4 years, trying to get them on site. They're a great anchor. The point of our shopping center, point of our retail street is this is a lifestyle center. You need lifestyle anchors for lifestyle center. If you want to have restaurants and active uses and Sephora and a lot of these really fun uses that you really want, you need to have these lifestyle anchors. And as great as Trader Joe's is, it's not a lifestyle anchor. It's a grocery store, which is great for us, but not the same thing. We've signed a lease with Our House Furniture, which is kind of down here. And each of these leases, as well as kind of the prospective leases that we have coming, all require co-tenancy, all require this kind of big list. Retail is, I'm sure everybody's waiting for all the retail to start and waiting to see something. And the great part about Trader Joe's, as an example, is they don't actually care who's around them. They know people will come to them, and that's fine. All these other tenants, they want to open at the same time. I'll open, but I don't actually have to open my business, and I don't have to pay any rent until these 10 other tenants are also leaving, and they're going through. And so it becomes this big game of, okay, how do I do it all at the same time? And so Luckily, and thankfully, with working with you guys, we've had this TIF that's been available to us for a long time, which has been the impetus of how this whole project's been designed. We need to build a parking structure. We have a funding source for this parking structure. We have a PID and the TIF, and we know how to, put those things together. As we got looking at our TIF agreement, we're saying, hey, we got to get this into the city. We're going to activate the TIF agreement, making sure we've met all the milestones of the TIF agreement so that we can back our bonds that they use to fund the parking structure that then supports all this retail. It became apparent that the lenders, especially from a bonding perspective, are going to have a very, very, there's just no value in the TIF agreement without it being fully active. And since we haven't met our affordable housing obligation, in theory, the TIF agreement could be canceled from their perspective. I think that legally, I don't know if the county or the tax community committee is going to form and do that to the city, but bondholder or lender is not going to look at it that way. They're going to say, this is a skeleton in the closet. Unless you can clear that, we can't use it as collateral. Period. And so so we knew this. We were trying to piece this together. We finally had lifetime to the point where they're willing to sign the lease. We said, okay, let's just sign the lease. Let's move forward. We're at risk, and we're in this period now where we're really working hard to try and get our bonds, get all the other stuff kind of fully designed and set up. And that became this rush to say, okay, well, I need to be able to issue bonds here. If I'm breaking ground on lifetime in the spring, I need to be issuing bonds here through this winter. And that's, I apologize, been this mad rush for trying to solve all these ADL questions, which the biggest one is the affordable housing question. And so from our perspective, we're incentivized to try and just solve it now. And the easiest way for us to find a place to solve this is in our existing housing project. Block D, which is here, the existing housing project on the site, unbeknownst to us when we started the project, a lot of things in the market changed while it was under construction. We encountered COVID, just so many things happened over the last 5 years, I'm sure you're all well aware. And it just delayed everything around it. So this project opened into a giant dirt field, and that's not great for housing. People don't want to live and with vacant retail on the ground floor and nothing under construction value. I think that that's changing really quickly. We've stabilized really quickly this summer. As soon as we announced the grocery store, I think that as we continue to bring in retail, we're already seeing the significant pressure of what that does from a lending standpoint. There's lots of case studies that we could provide of how much more rent people are willing to pay when they're close to walking distance from them, and especially grocery stores and all that kind of stuff. But it does put Block D in a position right now where it's stabilizing at rates that kind of makes some sense to factor in an affordable housing agreement where we're not already dealing with this enormous differential. And so when I have to go explain to my investors and our equity side, hey, we're going to sign this agreement, rents are going to do what my model looks like, show us what the financial impact is. How much incentive are we going to receive relative to costs? Because we at least need to cover our costs. And there's going to be this risk because whenever you're capping, every affordable housing agreement is an option contract. And you're at the whims of the market once you cap something. If I'm limited here and it only grows at 2%, then if the market grows at 8%, the cost is enormous. And if it doesn't grow, it grows at 0, then, it's just a measure of like where you perceive risk to be. And so I've had to go and make sure I've presented this and done the approval based on where our business plan is. What are we expecting the asset to do? And our business plan is, firmly cemented on, we want it to be full, but we really believe in all of this retail that we have coming in and the additional development and the pressure that that's going to have, really pushing our existing rental market up to kind of close, not all the way to Salt Lake City Class A, but somewhere around Sugar House Class A rents, which is kind of what I'll get to in a second. But anyway, I know it's a lot, and I'm kind of bouncing around, but I think the background is we have this retail plan that it's caused this rush, and I thank you all for, and your city staff's been amazing to work with us and continue to go through something that is relatively complicated, to make it so we can get to the point where we can really evaluate it and try and understand how this all works and what the right way to put it all together is. So what this boils down to, and again, Block D is from an affordable housing standpoint, this becomes a really fun place to have. It's an amazing stuff. The amenities here are fantastic. They're good as anything in the market. Everything from pool, rooftop deck, and then once we actually have the ground floor, retail amenities, you're walking distance from a workplace, you're working killing if you want to go to the grocery store, Lifetime Fitness, like all of these really pretty amazing amenities are all within walking distance. Work, play, shopping and all that stuff. And so I think we're excited that, you know, from a living environment, and then what we're targeting here is that these are units that already exist. These units would be no different than they're designed as first class A units. That's not going to change. And I guess like from the risk standpoint of like how are you going to manage the rest of the building, we have a significant amount of capital already invested to make sure retail remains Class A. We have condo owners on the top of the building that invested large sums of money to build out fantastic condos. And we have 100 Class A apartment units that we're incentivized to maintain those at Class A standards. And so we'll be building up your placement reserves, and then there's this future deadline, something that we're either currently looking at, or this will revert to the rest in 20 years with the dislocation. And so I don't think there's any scenario where, if even for whatever reason we haven't sold this asset in the future, or we've operated anything being offered from Class A standpoint, which creates a really amazing opportunity for affordability. To avoid jumping through all the numbers and the rents, I did update this with the most recent package. I had a package from May that I've been kind of using. I went through and updated all this from our October package just to kind of put in the most recent rents. And then we'll discuss that as we continue to talk about this. I think this becomes kind of the more important page, and I'll show it. Maybe I'll come back to this one and show it more as a graph, and then we'll come back to the numbers. Right now, we're still in this construction. Retail ground floor is open. We're going to be under construction. Lifetime must be a couple years out. The other retail that's across the streets a couple years out. There's ramp up period of time of construction, and then accelerate growth. But we feel like, regardless of what's happening macroeconomically, we're going to significantly beat the market and rate growth in our project here. And again, we're not pushing rate beyond what other are achieving in sugar house right now. We're saying, hey, right now we're significantly behind those. We think that once this becomes a really cool epicenter, there's a lot of barriers to entry to build single projects. I don't think there's scale competing with this. I think that this becomes a really fun application over the next 5 to 8 years. And then thereafter, I think we start to so what you're looking at here is what I've modeled, which is kind of what our business plan expectations are, which we're currently kind of below where the affordable rate is in the model. And I'll go back to show the numbers in a second. So to be clear, what we're projecting right now is to say we'll establish a maximum rent that we can charge that's based on 80% where we have 100 units that are already at that. They're already less than that. Our rents are the red line, but 80%. But it's a 20-year deed restriction where the affordable rents can only grow at their income, and then our rents, the market rents, are going to grow. So move back 20 years. The cost of living has grown 7-8% a year over the last 20 years. Part of the Class A apartments have grown close to 6%. That's way higher. That's way more growth than what I think. In that scenario, if that happens again over the next 20 years, this is an enormous cost to us. Yeah. And so if I were to model that, the cost today would be enormous. We're only modeling. Usually for this type of thing, we're looking with 3.6 because we are looking at trying to push rate back to close to that sugar house and then kind of stabilizing thereafter. I think that what it does, though, is it allows me to go to my investors today and say, hey, I'm not impacting today's value. I'm not impacting kind of anything we're doing right now. And frankly, as we move forward over the next year and we're finalizing kind of our refinance loan we're working on, probably about a year, probably next summer, it might not impact that as much either. So in terms of like an NPV impact to our investors, I don't need to ask for nearly as much of an incentive. And I think that this is actually a model that I really hope, because I think that logically, when you look at affordability in housing, you always hear, okay, well, how many affordable units do you need? There's thousands of affordable units is what you need. And then you hear, okay, the city just spent $10 million on the Heinz building in Salt Lake, and they did like 20 units in all studios. Okay, well, how is that? We need thousands of units, and you had $10 million, and you got 20 or something units. That feels insane. How is that helping affordability in any way? And I think that they're not hedging appropriately. They're looking at it saying, hey, politically, all I can really get across is a deeply affordable cut of a small number of units and applying all of the resources I have to get a deeply affordable cut on a small number of units, rather than saying, well, if I take that same resource, I could probably apply it over a much larger nominal and create a much larger number of units and create a more effective hedge against the actual risk. And so I think that's kind of where, and I apologize if I think I was from Feinstein, but that's kind of where this idea kind of came from, is to say, how can I take the limited resource that we have? I know that it's great that we have the $2 million and we have the 20% TIF set aside, but the TIF doesn't exist yet. You're not paying those property taxes. Since 2018 to today, we've only accumulated $800,000. And I think we would value the TIF higher than anybody else, because we think we're going to go build all these other things. So that's why we can do this. But if we were to go try and sell this on the market today, I don't think there's anybody out there that's going and buying the TIF from us for that type of a price. They're going to want to wait until the building is built, and they'll talk to us about it. And so I think that what we have right now is a very limited resource, but we have this problem where it's 100 units. And then we have an incentivized group on my side saying, well, we need to do it. We're signing up all these retailers. However, we can't do it in a way that impacts this apartment building, because we have a lot of them are the same investor, but we also have different investors and at different amounts, so we invested in the building. We have to be sure we can't just go undercut them for the benefit of the landowner. So what we've put together, I think, is this idea. So this is the baseline of the idea that we're projecting, based on the market projecting growth for this location, at 3.67% over that 20-year period. What that does is it generates a revenue loss for us of about $10.2 million, most of which comes beyond year 10. It takes us a while to ramp up, and then most of that revenue loss is the rating. And I'm looking at an NPV relative to what we're holding the cap rate at. So just kind of what do we think the value loss to our asset is? And it's about $5.7 million. And for that, we would receive the $2.5 million of money that's available now, today, and then hopefully $3 million of TIF over that time. Right now, the TIF is, if the TIF stays where it is, what we collected in 2024, we probably won't collect $3 million. But I think we know there's enough construction going on that we'll get there. When we look at it from a discount perspective, it becomes tricky. I don't know why this is funny. This is discounted at 10%, not 20%. Oh, that's the 20%. Sorry. That's the 20% sunset date. So that's kind of in a nutshell. And just to be clear again, I want to make sure it's not missed. For the first couple of years, we are starting with where these 100 units would already qualify as affordable. And so there would be no affordable, in theory, revenue to be paid. And the reason why I'm trying to show this as like a revenue to the city is because we also have the concept that if from an administrative standpoint it's harder, we're not finding the residents to take over units or whatever the case may be, we would be remitting these payments back to the city in these amounts. And so that would be a resource that you would then use to address affordability in a different way somewhere else. Or
that's if you're running all 100 at market,
yeah,
as opposed to.
That's what I'm showing you this way. Yeah. And so when I'm referring to this as like a revenue loss or like an asset to the city or an affordability asset, it's kind of showing the value of the assumption that you aren't placing anybody in those units that just, pays the lower rent. Just for optics standpoint. Yeah, so I think the bigger question kind of, and the goal I have right now is to try and put this in place. When we came in, we met with some of you and we talked about this. One of the things that kind of kept coming up was, well, what if it just takes longer to grow? What if we've applied this resource and we just don't see the benefit? It's been a period of time and the benefit's just not there. And really what's hard is that as we go back to our investment committee and we're talking about this, it's like, well, what are the scenarios where that's true? It's okay, well, we didn't grow rate. That might be true, but if we didn't grow rate, that means we didn't build a bunch of retail, and that means we're not succeeding in our development. It's just not working, or vacancies, or the market's transition. That means that we're just not succeeding, and market rents in this area are just a lot less. Because the only way that we don't pay money is if we're just not achieving the rent. If that makes sense. And then the other way that we lose is that, okay, great, we do marginally grow revenue, but it's not quite enough, but also but expenses skyrocket. So our incomes are less, and it's all market. And so when we first started looking at this, we kind of said, okay, well, what do we do to make this fair? If there is this amount of money that's coming out, how do we come up with a plan to try and say, hey, we're trying to do something creative? feel like this is something aggressive. So we said, well, to keep it simple, I think by year 7, we'll have a good idea of where we're headed. And I think not trying to incentivize this as this is like the main priority that we want you to take the termination option. We want to put it out there to say there needs to be some ability for the city to say, or future council, or whoever that is, to say, look, we've reviewed this program, we would rather do something else completely. We just want our money back. We're done. And so year 7, and so when I first was thinking about this, we were trying to again look at a bunch of different ways to invest circles. I'm like, okay, well, depending on how much TIF we collected, and where it rents, and where it comes, and how much was developed around us, and all sorts of different parameters, it just creates a lot of complexity. So what we settled on was saying, let's just, and then the other big problem is, Block D investors themselves don't want a termination option. They're saying, look, we're already taking the risk of an impact to our value just by having a deed restriction exist, period. Even if it doesn't drop our revenue, it just makes this a lot more complicated and more difficult to explain to the financing and all this kind of stuff. It's already a complicated asset. Why are we trying to just put hurdles in place? If you throw this potential liability out there, that's an even bigger risk. And so we said, okay, termination option, okay, let's put that in place. Let's have KFW guarantee this of the landowner. We'll guarantee that we're going to make this termination option to you, so it's not tied by the project. But we just felt like it was safe, like easier and simpler to just say, okay, in year 7, if you guys determine that this doesn't work, tell us you're going to terminate. Great. Then we'll move forward for a couple years goes by just so we can build up reserves. Starting in year 10, we'll start paying you back your $5.5 million. And $5.5 million was just, that was the total incentive that we valued. I hope we collect that much in TIF, but that's kind of the idea. We'll try and, regardless of economic performance or whatever's going on in the market, if in year 7 you guys determine we don't want to do this, then starting in year 10, we'll make those payments back to you. I think that the goal is for this to work together, trying to keep making sure we have the right units and we're doing this appropriately. And to be clear, okay, it doesn't really start ramping up even in my model until year 6, 7. And I think that no matter what, by year 7, we'll have a pretty good indicator as to where things are, if it's going to work, and when it's going to work, and at what rates, and all that stuff. And so that was kind of the idea. So there's this termination option that exists, and I fumbled around kind of the background of how it came to be. But the idea was just to try and make sure there was a safeguard. This isn't, we are kind of moving quickly, and this isn't something that's normal. To do 100 units in a project, it seems like a lot. But I think that the methodology of how we're getting to 100 units is actually really creative, and I actually think it allows us to create a Class A project in the right way. And 80% AMI is really, it's affordable, but so 80% AMI right now. 2025, median family income is $122,700 before solid camp. And that's put in up. And that's the metric we'll use published number. And 80% of that's $92,000. So, sorry, I need to fix that. But it's $92,000. You have the right numbers on it.
And the rent number's like 30% of that.
And the rent is that's all kind of the normal. So 1/3 of the AMI threshold is kind of what you're looking at. The way HUD comes up with their median family income is a formula. It's on the HUD website. If you want to get and look at it, it's not super complicated, but they try to back out the extreme ends of the population density. So fixed incomes kids to try and normalize what a family can afford, whether family income is what the normal family income is in that market. I don't know if it's quick math, but it's a good job. And so then the idea is that, so then the other thing we try to do is we try to say, okay, one of the other bigger problems that most markets do when they address affordability is they say, okay, well, the rule is that we distribute based on 80% of AMI. 80% of this number is 1/3 of that works out to be that you could pay rent at around $2,800 a month, and that's what the kind of the affordable threshold is. But that doesn't make any sense. That's actually a ton of rent. How does that make sense to a studio apartment or a 1-bedroom apartment or a townhome? How do you actually now spread that over the type of unit? And so what the most markets do is they say, okay, well, I'm going to spread it over a type of unit, but simplify it to studios, micro units, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and so on, and distribute that again by occupants, and they could occupy each one of those units. The problem is that you're not kind of taking it far. The way the HUD table works, they distribute incomes, and then they again go to HUD and they say, okay, well, how did the federal government distribute that income? But when they look at that, they're comparing that to HUD housing, which is usually like a 2 or 3 story walk-up apartment project. It's very simple, being built on land that's not worth very much, being built with very minimal amenities. So where the cost differential, the amount of rent you would need to support 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartments and a HUD building, would need a lot more money to support 2-bedroom. Whereas in the Class A apartment building, it has a little bit more. They have to spread the cost of all of those amenities, the structured parking, everything else that's all factored into that Class A apartment building. That incremental cost to step up in unit type is really expensive. And so what you find is that in any apartment building where you're instituting any affordability that's a Class A apartment building, they almost always just squish everything into studios. Because if you use the HUD tables, same HUD tables I was just talking about, a studio apartment can pay at 80% AMI at this income, $1,900 a month, which is a ton. But that's, like in Salt Lake City, 80% AMI, that's the threshold for affordability, $1,900 a month. We're currently renting these apartments at like $1,375 a month. How's that fair? And so, yeah, of course, yeah, we'll just do all of our studios, and if we're building a new building, I would say, okay, cool, I'll do affordability, but it's only studios, period. And so what I tried to do here was to say, the other part of this is now spreading that occupant load, is what HUD calls it, but it's really just spreading the weight of how we're now saying, how do I spread that $2,700 a month by the type of unit to come up with a fair costing metric for how you would qualify a 2-bedroom as affordable versus a studio apartment as affordable, or 1-bedroom apartment. And so that's what this table does. So from a compliance standpoint, what we're asking for is that we would, on an annual basis, and this would be kind of mission compliance, we would set, these would be, all of these numbers are just required. We would pull the number from HUD, and as soon as it's available, we'll tell you guys, and we'll say, hey, this was just published, here's the new number for this year. And it's always backwards looking, so we have to be conservative and make sure we're, targeting appropriately. But again, if we overcharge, we have to give you the money, so it's not like a, never windfall to us if there is a mistake. But so for studio apartment for these units, it would be $1,418 a month. It would be kind of the cap. And we're currently at $1,350 to $1,375. Yeah, was this the one I just sent you, or did you send them
So, and I'm not sure, Stephanie, what's the target?
Studio is 1554.
I updated
that.
Well, what's the 80% AMI? Was it 122 or 1?
No.
Oh, AMI is 127, but 80% is 80.
That's not true. Let me get you the accurate number. I don't want to tell you which one's the right number. My goal, we're going to use this map. The idea is this map. If I screwed up on one of our sends or whatever, let's look at it and we'll fix it. Apologize. But the idea that I was trying to do here was to try and bring these rents down a lot closer to, do you have the same number of units on yours?
This was the exhibit 8.
Or just the number, it would be a 14.
Oh, it's.
No, there's 9.
Yeah, so yeah, that was the older set. This is the newer one.
And so, Mac, I'll just tell you, this is what we got as part of the agreement, is what they have in their packet.
This wasn't the 77.
I didn't, yeah, I've seen it out.
We'll solve it. What I was trying to do here was, before I had too many kind of units that should be more affordable, clumped of units that are currently generating way too much rent. And so you had units that had huge patios or extra features clumped together, especially just studios. We have studios that it's important. We'll go look at the project just so we can see it. The studios on our podium level here that have patios that are almost the same size as all the livable space inside the easement. And people are going to pay a lot more money to lease that studio, even though it's exactly the same unit above that, or the same studio. So I have those units all clumped into the same push, the same kind of population. And it just wasn't representative. Actually, they didn't script it. Whereas like these units on average, we're currently charging about $1,300 a month. If you just jump up to those 9 that are, have those added features, say you floor plan, but just better features, we're at, $120 to probably more per month currently. And so if I'm trying to establish kind of what maximum rents are, I want to make sure I'm trying to clump together the right types of unit population so that we can, because I want to find the right units and I want to create affordability, and I don't want to like just create a maximum threshold that's too high arbitrarily. I want to make sure. So what I tried to do is from each of the stacks, like studios, but like takeaways that are, we got the penthouse level that have vaulted ceilings and you're on the top floor where the amenity is, and the one on the ground floor that has a big patio. Let's take those ones out, but then let's keep the ones in the middle that we will charge less rent, because then I don't need to ask, I don't need to create as big of a weighting. So instead of being over $1,500, I can be down to $1,400 for those units. Does that make sense? And so I was trying to go through and try and bring that rent threshold down on different classes to find room.
So is the studio plus, like the ones that have the plus, and those are the ones like the other studio?
Exactly. And then the same thing is true for like the junior 1 bedrooms, and that's just a studio, but you actually have a bedroom in the studio. It just doesn't, it's not on the window. That's what those ones are. Same idea with those ones, the bigger ones. And what's cool about this table is that say you had a teacher or somebody and they really wanted to get a 2-bedroom unit and qualify, and they wanted to have a better, nicer unit, we can talk and say, okay, well, we have a number. We know how to bring it in as affordable in a 1-bedroom large, one of these bigger units. So fine, we'll move it over to that unit, and they can be affordable, but it'll be $100 more a month. It's up to kind of how we talk to each other. But I was just trying to spread the differential out of the table a little bit better. But the idea would be every year, and just to be clear, I just made it sound like we could move units around wishy-washy. We're going to send you with this first compliance test 100 units, and those are the 100 units. The deed restriction isn't on those specific units, it's on the building. But those 100 units, the only way we can move them is if we agree. So if you guys and us say, okay, great, we'll move the affordable unit to another unit in the building, that's the only way it moves. And so I didn't want that to be confusing. We can move the units, but it's with us working together to decide if we want to. It's not up to us to just kind of say, oh, we're going to move this around and mess with this on an annual basis. It's the same 100 units, and we're just kind of working on how to effectively use those units, or if we want to move them to different types of units, we can.
So is it a physical unit in the building?
Yeah. So I've sent Gina a plan that's here's all the floor plans, and so we'll provide you annually, which will be the same unless there was a modification, but all the floor plan, and it'll highlight those specific units, and we'll send you a rent roll for the whole year showing you exactly the revenue we collected and who the resident was and whatever we were allowed to provide you for those 100 units. And the only way it would change from those 100 units is if we both agree to change it. And in which case we would note that change and qualify what that is. But on an annual basis, we would send you this compliance certificate, which all this really is we've updated that top box to be whatever the new odd number is. That establishes these thresholds, and then attached to that would be the floor plans of the building, which will be the same unless we've agreed to modify it. And then attached to that will be an annualized rent roll showing on each of those 100 units what we collected in it. And if it was leased to an affordable person, should just be the number you're already carrying on your books. If it was leased at market, we would then remit back to you whatever the difference is. And you'd have the right to audit us and all of that stuff.
Now, we decided in the last conversation if Block E goes under construction, we're fine with moving some of the units, but we just have to create a separate agreement.
Yeah,
we're not going to mess with it right now.
I want us to recognize that that's probably a good idea to be able to be flexible in the future.
Yeah.
But I don't want to complicate our financing or any of the fundraising, all the different stuff we have to do for Block C and F as we move into that development phase. But it probably makes sense. I mean, those buildings are going to be physically connected. We're going to have a bridge that connects those buildings. It'll make sense for, it'll be a pretty unbelievable living environment 10 years from now to be able to lease here for 10 or 15% less than you lease otherwise in the market. I think that would be a pretty amazing situation to have. And it'll be a really cool tool for workforce. And that's what this level of AMI is it's workforce. And these are young, new professionals. These are young families that, have a spouse that's taking time off and, for raising, starting their first kid or something like that. And they're in a 2-bedroom, but now they qualify and they really need something for them.
We actually were talking to, was it Doug, the Trader Joe's captain, and for some of those employees that are single young people that just maybe need a studio,
Exactly.
it may be perfect for them. It's perfect for them.
And I think like all the different people working, like killing their whole businesses, they have these startup businesses that like to hire transactional employees. So they might have 10 full-time employees and then 10 people that are there based on, services. And so, I think that this type of affordable housing is something that I hope gets repeated. I really do think this is the right way to address affordable housing, and simply because there's a huge number of demand and need to kind of hedge that market to try and bring it to normalize it. And there's never going to be enough resource to buy it all today. But you can chip away at it thinking 10 years in advance. And I think you could actually create a proper hedge if people start copying something like this. And I think the termination option is fitting because the landowner entity, I think, is taking some risk here, but we're also seeing the benefit of trying to clearing the ADL and being able to move forward on the retail and all these different things with the guaranteed. Anyway.
So is now the right time to, I didn't have very many questions, to be honest with you, but the one question I did have, Gina and I talked about, was paragraph 5, which is the termination agreement. And, hopefully that doesn't happen, because if it does happen, it means, like you say, that the spread between the wage and the market rates isn't what we thought or whatever. But I'm trying to understand, I want to make sure I understand how that works, because I get the $2.5 million, but the $3 million that's in there, so it's a $5.5 million payout over, and you just stretch it out over 10 years to be able to pay it off. But what's that $3 million? Where's that come from?
It's a potential TIF that we may collect over the remainder of the TIF agreement.
The 20% or the 20%? So are you going to keep so you have now, this is what I'm trying to understand. So the 100 youths are coming back to the city. Like, it's not working.
So the termination options exercise.
The termination options exercise, we get our $2.5 million back, and we get $3 million back, which is your projected 20% TIF that you're going to collect through 2038. Is that the $3 million?
So the idea right now is that the TIF would be, I guess we would sign, maybe it would be, I don't know legally how it's works, but assume that it's potentially saying there's an agreement between Block D owner and the RDA, I guess, saying, hey, this 20% is going to flow to the RDA and straight to Block D through 2038. It's just that simple. So the TIF is now signed. The $3 million is an NPV of what we're thinking we might be able to collect on that if we built out the whole site, but as we're currently projecting, and discounted at 10%.
Why wouldn't the 20% just flow to the city at that point?
I think that it just opens, we can do it that way, if that's the way, if optically you're thinking this feels weird and you don't like it, I think we could. What I would like to address then is just the risk side of it, of saying, okay, well, if we're saying no matter what, we're limited to only collect the amount of TIF we collect up to the termination point, then I want to relook at what that risk is for us. Because now I have to take off a couple of years of the TIF when I came up with the $3 million. So now that kind of accrued to everybody.
I don't want to complicate things at this late stage, but I'm just trying to think of like, okay, so we've got.
What I was trying to do, I had a lot of arguments, very similar to those, not arguments, but with my family about, well, how is this fair? Like, why not just reimburse them based on what our actual financial impact is? We should do some type of measure of NOI, which is kind of the first thing I talked about, was saying, hey, we'll pay you based on how our NOI adjusts over that time. And if our NOI grows at least what the AMI grew at, then maybe we owe you this money. But if our NOI is flat, then maybe we don't owe you. Or different ideas like that where we're talking about.
If you are really, I mean, that's a projection based on the increment you think you're going to collect. So you really don't, I mean, you're not really sure what that's going to be anyway, right? And But you're committing to $3 million, right?
That's exactly right. So what we tried to do is just say, let's try and simplify it and come up with a number that we'll commit to. And we're just going to commit to it. We pay you $5.5 million regardless of what happens in the marketplace. And so is there a scenario in year 7 where it feels like, you guys collected too much TIF or something?
If that's the case, it's a successful project.
It just seems a little weird.
Again, I don't want to complicate things at this late stage, but you're kind of saying we think we're going to, and we'll just pay you that money up front, and then we have the obligation of meeting that 100-unit affordable housing obligation from that point forward, right?
Right.
I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking about,
You're right.
because I'm not sure.
To be clear, so it's not. I mean, it's currently so the way I got this approval was I kind of said, hey, optically, guys, do you really want to have the local city feel like we pulled one over on them in 7 years because this thing doesn't work and they get stuck in it? And my uncles and everybody's like, no, we don't want to be that way. So we'll just guarantee to pay them back to them and give them back their money. And so then it became, okay, well, how do I build an NPV that kind of leaves us somewhat normalized? And so that's where I came up with it. Do it over 10 years, and we're just trying to keep it simple. I'm happy to look at this and make it add layers, and it's not trying to I'm not trying to say it's more complicated and I won't do it. I'm happy to do it. We wanted to create some thresholds as to how the TIF was collected. That's fine, but I just want to make sure we're measuring that against the potential risk on our side, where it's like, okay, well, if you exercise the termination option in year 7 and there's the opportunity for you to get back the termination option plus additional TIF revenue, then I also want to look at the downside for us of saying, okay, but if that happens in year 7 and our NOI has been flat for a period of time and you're exercising this TIF option and now we're having to also pay you back all this money, then maybe there's a reduction or something, just so that if it is like the other side of this, what's the worst case scenario for us where incomes don't grow, but expenses are skyrocketing, and you guys exercise the termination option, which means our NOI has been flat and we're having to repay this. It could be punitive on us, is all I'm saying. So I'm not actually arguing against you. I think you're absolutely right in telling and pointing out what the obvious issue with what I'm recommending or what I'm asking for. But the only reason why I got there was because I kept trying to go through these scenarios and trying to decide what the right what to do based on, okay, well, do we establish revenue structures, is NOI thresholds, do we do something based on how the TIF is collected?
I like the fixed guarantee.
And so,
well,
because
I want to think it might not be a good deal for you guys, to be honest with you. Because you're guaranteeing us the money before you've collected it, and you may collect less than $3 million. The 7-year termination point to the end of the RDA, right? So I see what I wasn't saying it like I'm not sure. It's like, it's just curious to me that we've got this obligation and the developer still continues to collect the 20% that's a set aside. That's the thing but yeah, I'm not sure it's on better to get.
And then it is repaid to us over time with no interest. So this may be one we just want to talk about a little bit more.
And again, I really don't want the termination option to turn into the thing that everybody's looking at. Like, here's how we're going to make the deal fair is by tweaking the termination option.
Yeah.
I want the affordable housing function. I'm not trying to say not. I'm not being just saying. I think that if we really want the affordable housing agreement to stay in place and to work. Yeah. So I'm hopeful that we're all incentivized at that time to.
No, this was an add-on. This came. I thought it was great that it was included because I think it gives us some protection that we've covered ourselves in the event that, hey, this is kind of a new way of meeting this workforce housing requirement, and if it doesn't work, we've given ourselves an out to get our money back and start over again.
That was the hope. And also just because the termination option, the actual amount of money can't be guaranteed by the asset. That comes just as default investment financing we get. It's guaranteed by King Value and owner. Right now, I got to figure out through that getting through it. Once the folks can figure out this agreement fully, but it can't be against the property. Just
you guys, I'm sure everybody's tracking that. I just was thinking about it. It just seems a little weird to me. I don't know, Gina, what you have?
I mean, I do think this is one that is going to require more conversation, and probably with Jamie and Wade. I know Todd had an initial concern about interest.
I mean, I'm not, but they're guaranteeing that money, but they're not collecting it. They're going to pay it as they collect the increment over time from that time forward. So it's not like they're sitting on a pot of money and gaining interest on it. They're collecting the increment as they go, right?
We pay it as we collect kind of revenue.
Yeah. But I'm kind of.
Yeah, TIF at this stage, future TIF is kind of funny money. I just like the idea of the guaranteed payment and settling, because it's kind of.
Well, I just thinking about, I don't
paper
want
losses.
Well, the one thing I don't want is I don't want to start over again, and I mean.
The thing we need to pin down on the guarantee file, I think, is whether there needs to be an interest component at some level, and then what the collateral was.
Well, yeah, collateral was the other thing we were trying to stay away from, because that creates its own.
Well, we know what it can't be, right?
It can't be the property. And so I haven't gotten this approved, but my thought is things like Woodbridge appropriation guarantees and things like that are things my family would never walk away from, and hopefully that carries to like what that means. But I think that we can go through the levels to make sure this is a very valuable termination of guarantee that we at least get $5 million back. It's kind of what I'm trying to put in place. I don't want this to turn into, oh hey, I think triggered $5.5 million and I get 8% interest on that, and that's actually a pretty good amount of money. Let's just do that. And so I really focus on negotiate the
Because if the thing's struggling, then the TIF might not add up to $3 million to begin with.
Well,
so then the project takes off, and the TIF is more. If the TIF is more, then we're giving up something, but then the project's less likely to become a hit.
It was I think I'm on the perspective. Other cities cheap. You aren't pinning it to specific units, and what it means for the people that run it is they won't be seen as these are the affordable units. That's correct. And when you look at finishes within the building, our understanding is it's the same finishes as what the other units would be. One of the reasons that they want to change or be able to reallocate the unit is that you can cycle the leases. And so it's not a whole bunch of affordable units now and then you only get them available again in the future, if somebody stuff. So where it's not cycle, then you already have a couple persons on a recurrent basis.
Right. As Jeff, maybe if Trader Joe's gets married and has a kid, or advance up in the same building in a different configuration.
I think some of the last few details can get down. Still,
I just don't want it to drag out.
Yeah, I really do appreciate how quickly and how much effort everybody's made to consider this. And I know because we are breaking with the norm, this is both hard on legally everything. This makes this tricky to kind of tie everything together. But I do really want to solve this and be able to move forward on these projects and get this all done. I feel like we've got a great impetus and momentum. It's worth our time, and I hope to try and look at this and figure out a way to solve it. I do want to. So on Monday, I was talking to Ann about having some time, or excuse me, tomorrow morning, to walk through the building and look at some units and just get a better idea of what we're actually talking about with the units that we've selected. From there, I do want to make sure we're getting deadlines and having some chances to really kind of review how the legal contract works. The machinations of how the economic field functions, it really does matter. And so I want to make sure that we're looking at the affordable housing agreement and making sure that it's functioning and that we all feel like this is what we want to do and how we want to administer it and all these things. I think that one of the cool parts about this agreement in general is the idea of how we partner, or we're really partnering with the affordable housing team, and to say, well, maybe there's other types of affordability, like maybe 80% workforce is not actually what you need. What you need is 50 units that are more deeply affordable. I think this actually opens the door to say, okay, well, these 50 at market, and we'll take all the benefit from those and apply it to the other 50 and make those even more deeply affordable or something like that, depending on who the residents are. I'm not sure what legal problems that opens up. I'm just saying, I think that there's a lot of really fun ways that this type of program can be administered that really addresses specific affordable needs to this community and to future communities if we look at similar programs like this in other buildings, where we're creating a program that allows a building to be built relative to stabilized cost of capital and efficient uses of capital to get it built and get it stabilized, but then just really hedges against that constant risk of just overinflation of market rents. And, uses that resource that's created both between either creating affordable units or getting to afford the most affordable. So I think this is personally, if I'm going to really try and approach this, but since it is new, I'm sure there are pitfalls in it, and we need us to be working together on this thing. So what I genuinely hope is that what I'm guessing happens, what only happens is if we're talking in year 7 and you guys are saying the quasi as a termination option, more than likely, if we're struggling or depending on what's going on with us, we're going to say, how about we adjust the affordable housing contract instead? That's probably, we'd rather have that be just like getting a deal than those types of things. So I know you guys have a draft that's kind of delayed some ways. I guess you're working on that line, but if I can try to push and work on those, right, if you sit down and we can talk through economics and really try and focus on it. How do we feel about the affordable contract? How do we feel about the units that we're starting out? I did send you what I think would be kind of the initial compliance information, Gina, for the 100 units that would be selected and kind of rent tables based on our rent roll. I don't have a draft written yet. I'm working on this one together. For whatever reason, their manager's software can't give me an annualized rent roll. They can give me monthly rent rolls that are kind of annoying to put together. But if I have to, I'll include that with. But I do want to make sure whatever we set up, the other kind of big pushback I'm getting is this going to turn into a large administrative burden on our side to administer this? Because affordability, when you do affordable housing, it's two sides. It's both less rent and significantly higher administrative costs, and how do those units get placed, and how are you managing compliance and reporting, collections, all that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to mitigate that by saying, no, contractually, we manage this building 100% the same, nothing changes. We just get fed leases from the city for these 100 units. And if they don't feed us leases, we'll release the market. We just reconcile. And so the pushback I'm getting now is, well, show me the reconciliation. Is that simple? Is it really a simple thing, or is this like, is that something that we see?
So the burden would kind of be on us to have a queue of
qualified.
Eligible renters ready to go as the units open up. And we do have some funding inside the TIF to support that.
So, Gina, from us, are you just needing overall, because it sounds like there's some details that we need to iron out as far as the interests and stuff, but is the question, are we supportive of this overall concept?
Exactly. And then if you are there parts, are you supportive of the concept, but $2.5 million gives you pause? Is there any part of it that you would like to consider before we have a public hearing on the budget aspect, which we're thinking on November 20th?
Interesting. To me, it seems like, Matt could have just went with $4.5 million, and then, and worked in some type of interest component too. I think you're just making a good fit after kind of say, hey, this is your get out of jail free club, your option or whatever in cases that doesn't work out. And so I don't think that.
Yeah, I'm supportive of it. I think it's.
Yeah, that's a minor detail. I think that if you have a problem, then work it out. And
That's
either way.
what I feel about it is I just had some questions about that paragraph 5 and where the 3 million come from and I'm almost kind of like with Paul, like 3 million if you want to give it to me but I'm not sure that's a great deal for you guys. But anyway, however that works out, I think that might be the only real, get these charts finalized and whatnot, it's going to document, but I just don't want it held up. I would like to see it. I would like to see everything ready to go by the 20th if we can do it. Because we've only got 2 council meetings, not to say we wouldn't call it an emergency meeting or something, but I'd like to get it done within our council schedule and preferably by the 4th, because I think you're not here on the 11th.
And that is how we've kind of got it outlined right now. At the same time, we do want to touch base with our 2 largest participants in the taxing entity committee, and that would be Salt Lake County and the Granite School District. My goal is that would happen before Thanksgiving. The calendar is not our friend, but I hope it can happen.
But that's a courtesy call too, really, isn't it?
It is a courtesy call. The tech committee agreement specified that the county would assist us with this process.
Not hopeful they've been so far.
I would just say I think that reflected kind of a difference in staff capacity in Holladay in 2007 versus now. I think we had someone who was devoted to doing housing, and a lot of people were in need of less assistance. I want to make sure they agree with that.
First,
Yeah, I agree. I think we should do that, but I don't think it's an issue for getting us through the process. But as soon as we get things finalized, we should reach out to them and tell them what we're doing.
Not looking for their approval, but just say, here's what we're doing, just so you know.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't want any of our partners to complicate this for us.
I got you. Yeah. But I'm perfectly comfortable with how we're using the $2.5 million, especially since it's got a clock on it. I don't know that we're going to have a better opportunity to use it for us if it solves a huge problem for us.
I think your recommendation with covering the discrete market if we can't fill them, if we can't fill the unit.
Last thing we want is vacant units on us.
Making a good faith effort here, but in the event, for whatever reason, it doesn't work, then we can pivot and try to do it on our own.
I think everyone's hearing that people want their kids to be able to move to Holladay, and I think that this gives a really good option for people to start their family better, just if they're on their own, to start out and live.
I knew the goal, so. Yes.
Right next to that convention, I'm sure.
So we'll put the ball in.
Yeah.
I think our staff can go on this.
I really appreciate everybody's efforts and that's helped understand things, but there's a lot of, you just glanced at this type of a contract that looks really, really good. I think it takes time to kind of say, oh, actually, I think this starts to really fill a gap and make some sense. And, so thank you for looking at this and more people with the arguments.
Thank you. Right.
Yeah, appreciate it.
You guys haven't said anything. Just love coming to council meetings.
It's going to be the last item on the day.
Not the worst council meetings.
Yeah.
High praise, indeed.
Well, Trader Joe's was exciting.
Yeah, it's funny.
I'm just excited about the bird. It's market for move on. Like everybody has already told me to get them to go to the symposium. It's just sad. I guess he's like, when's the movie already done? Interesting. I don't. Everyone I know knows. Well, it's not like they're figuring it out. I just it's unnoticed, but it's really fun to have them open. And I don't know if you had made any films off space.
I heard just the other day. In fact, I need to have a chat with you.
If I don't decide if it's the greatest thing to like go or because
I think that it's going to be a pretty big, just the amount of new businesses and startup activity and just the things that are going to happen. Not only the large, it's going to be their flagship location. It is now the flagship location. It's their largest location. That's cool. I think Tillman's going to grow into a bigger business.
Where are they from?
Yeah, another in back in 2015 or 16, they runs Tillman. Actually, UVU, he was trying to talk UVU into helping sponsor an accelerator space. And at the time, he was working for Barclays, that bank in London. And he did a similar platform called Rise by Barclays and kind of all the core markets around the world. So he's opening in Mumbai and other different things. And so I was trying to work with him to open his first store, actually more on the Peterson Mall. But my family's stodgy. They wouldn't approve it. I wish they did. But since then, what I really like about him specifically and the way he built the team is he just really focuses on competent, really skilled people. And I've been so impressed by all the different team members and people he puts on around him and lets him kind of run with it. And now they're in California, they're in Oregon, they've got Salt Lake, Denver, they're in Boulder, growing in Phoenix. And so it's been really, really impressive just kind of watching their trajectory. But what's fun about it from a developer standpoint is, so WeWork came out, and the weird flaw with WeWork is they'll move into an office complex. I'm sorry, I don't mean to take all their time with it. We stuff. People learn stuff. Shut up.
Take your time, you got 2 minutes. It is only 9:30, not 10:30. Did you look back? I'm like, this is going late. This was like 8 years ago. You see it actually being
So appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
They're a great platform. And if you guys haven't been to our house, that store is going to be really cool. Roth's new store is fantastic. And everything we're doing right now is huge upgrades, the design, materials. As Roth submitted their full set, all the hard materials, the brick, the wood finish, it's a beautiful building. It's just, the amount of cells that you guys are talking about your sales tax being flat.
Well, it's not flat, we had a nice growth curve when they changed legislation to allow us to collect property tax, and that's all kind of caught up. So now it's normal, like 2.5%, 3%, not 6 or 7%.
Hope these tenants kind of meet their projections, and we're all happy. Thank you guys.
Thank you, guys. Okay, I think we are going to push the Title III review to the 20th.
Yes.
But we do have a very important closed session we have.
And we'll be quick.
So let me take a motion on that.
Go ahead, Tom. Go to it.
I'm not motioning.
I'll make that a motion.
Not motion generated the point, I'm going to be your chair. So.
Yeah, somebody's got to make a motion.
Reset.
We move to closed session for the purpose of this item, code,
Sure, you do things.
Okay, we have a motion.
He's the big guy. I think I only have to say is he was the best. So,
Okay, say that.
Say that again.
Not within UCA.
it's one of that question.
I had to discuss and my previous motion to discuss real estate, potential real estate transaction.
That good?
Yeah.
And we still have a second, so, okay, Drew? Say yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
And I vote yes, so we're in closed session, we're just